Chapter 1769. Heavenly Demon's Secret Realm, Heavenly Demon Palace. At this moment, Murong Yu is still like a bottomless pit, crazily devouring the mysterious energy from the heavenly demoness body. Although he was much stronger than before, he still had not broken through. However, the heavenly demoness was in trouble. At this moment, the heavenly demoness face was pale, without a trace of blood, and the aura from her body had plummeted, falling to about 50% of what it was a few days ago. These were all secondary. After all, as long as she had enough time, she would quickly recover from the loss of energy. However, the heavenly demoness theurgy consumed a lot of her blood essence, a technique that burned her blood essence as the foundation. This was her innate theurgy. All this time, she had used this theurgy less than 10 times. More than once, the heavenly demoness even wanted to give up. After all, if this continued, Murong Yu might not break through even if she used up all her blood essence. Murong Yu's soul was so strong that it exceeded the heavenly demoness expectations. At this moment, the heavenly demoness was secretly regretting. However, at this point, she would definitely not give up. Thus, she continued. As time passed, Murong Yu's soul aura became stronger and stronger. The She character formula speed also became faster and faster. On the contrary, the heavenly demoness aura became weaker. It was only a tenth of what it was a few days ago. Once her energy was depleted, even if she still had plenty of blood essence, she would not be able to continue improving Murong Yu's She character formula. Murong Yu, I can only hold on for one day. If you can't break through in one day, this will be considered a failure. The heavenly demoness' tired voice sounded in Murong Yu's mind. Got it, Murong Yu replied in a low voice. In fact, Murong Yu was also constantly paying attention to the heavenly demoness situation, and everything was in his eyes. However, he could not split himself. He needed to focus on improving himself. He had to break through. Otherwise, everything would be for naught. Soon, the day was over. The heavenly enchantress didn't even have the strength to sit. Her body trembled as she sat cross-legged in front of Murong Yu. It was as if a gentle breeze would blow her away. The aura he emitted was as weak as an ordinary person's. Alas, the heavenly enchantress slowly opened her eyes and stopped sending the mysterious energy into Murong Yu's body. At this moment, her strength had been exhausted, and she could no longer help Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu still hadn't broken through. In other words, this upgrade plan was a complete failure. Not only was the heavenly enchantress power depleted, but her blood essence was also severely damaged. It would likely take her a very long time to recover. Just as the heavenly enchantress was filled with disappointment, she realized that Murong Yu did not stop when she stopped. At this moment, Murong Yu was still cultivating. The heavenly demoness was astonished and immediately probed with her divine sense. Immediately, she saw that Murong Yu's swordsman formula was still operating at a terrifying speed. Immediately, the heavenly demoness' face lit up with joy. If this continues, his soul cultivation method might be able to improve. At the same time, the heavenly demoness retracted her divine sense and distanced herself from Murong Yu. She quietly looked at Murong Yu and did not disturb him. On the other hand, little Z quietly watched the two of them from the side and did not come to help. Although she and the heavenly demoness were formed from the same soul. But little Z did not know the heavenly demoness' divine sense. Otherwise, she would have already helped Murong Yu improve his cultivation. At this moment, Murong Yu was half happy and half worried. Why? What surprised him was that if the swordsman formula continued operating at this speed, it would break through to the next stage sooner or later. But what worried him was that the swordsman formula was operating faster and faster. It was so fast that he could no longer control it. Murong Yu was worried that in the end, his physical body and even his soul would not be able to withstand the operating speed of the swordsman formula and explode. If that happened, he would be killed by his own cultivation method. That would be hilarious. Murong Yu focused his mind and began to control the swordsman formula with all his might. However, after a day, he still could not control the swordsman formula. He could not control it at all. At this moment, the swordsman formula had already gone beyond his control and was operating at a high speed on its own. The terrifying speed was like a stormy sea and also like a storm, and the speed was getting faster and faster. Boom! Crack! Crack! Not long after, Murongyu's clothes could not withstand the power of the swordsman formula and were directly shattered into pieces by the high-speed operating power of the swordsman formula. For a moment, Murongyu appeared naked in front of the heavenly demoness and little Z. The two girls were startled. Of course, it was not because of Murongyu's sudden nakedness. It was because of Murongyu's sudden accident. Just when the two girls were startled, they clearly saw that the surface of Murongyu's body began to crack. At the same time, a bloody mist shot out from Murongyu's body. This time, the two girls were even more startled. Little Z took a step forward and rushed straight to Murongyu. However, before she appeared beside Murongyu, a terrifying soul attack directly hit her soul. Ah! Little Z suddenly screamed, and her whole body flew backward at a speed several times faster than before. The heavenly demoness looked over and saw that little Z's face was pale, and her 7 orifices were bleeding. Little Z's eyes were even filled with fear, as if she had seen something terrifying. The heavenly demoness was about to ask, but at this moment, her eyes were also filled with fear. An incomparably frightening soul pressure suddenly erupted from Murongyu's body. Then, with Murongyu's body as the center, it swept in all directions like a tide. An incomparably terrifying soul attack shot straight towards the heavenly enchantress. The heavenly demoness was almost scared to death. If it was before, she could have dodged. However, now that her last bit of strength was exhausted, she could not escape. Was she going to be killed by this bastard just like that? The heavenly demoness smiled bitterly. She had thought about how she would die, but she definitely did not think that she would be killed in such a situation. As for little Z seemed to be heavily injured as well. Whether she could protect herself was still a problem, and it was even more impossible for her to save the heavenly demoness. The heavenly demoness and little Z were about to be killed. However, at this moment, Murongyu suddenly opened his eyes. He roared, and then quickly slammed his palms towards the heavenly demoness and little Z. Bang! Bang! The heavenly demoness and little Z were instantly sent flying out of the heavenly demoness palace. Heavenly demoness, close the heavenly demoness palace for me. Murongyu's gloomy voice was heard, as if he was suppressing extreme pain. The heavenly demoness nodded, and with a thought, she closed the heavenly demoness palace. The heavenly demoness palace was originally a part of her supreme weapon. As long as she did not die, she could close it with just a thought. Rumble. The moment the heavenly demoness palace closed, Murongyu's figure disappeared from the heavenly demoness palace and appeared in Hichu Luoshu. However, he left Hichu Luoshu in the heavenly demoness palace. As soon as Murongyu appeared in the heavenly demoness palace, a series of cracking sounds came from his body. The cracks on his body became more and more shocking, as if he was about to explode. Life energy, Murongyu roared, and with all his might, he started to operate the life energy to repair his body and soul that were about to shatter. At the same time, the roots of the tree of life, which towered into the depths of the chaos stratum, started to tremble violently. They absorbed the boundless chaos energy from the depths of the chaos stratum, and then turned it into life energy, which surged into Murongyu's body and soul. With the support of the life energy, Murongyu's body and soul recovered quite a bit. However, this was only temporary. As the swordsman formula ran faster and faster, the pressure on Murongyu's body and soul would also increase. In the end, his body and soul would explode. By then, Murongyu would die. I can't die. Murongyu roared in his heart and tried to suppress the swordsman formula. However, there was almost no effect. Murongyu could no longer control the speed of the swordsman formula. In the end, even the life energy couldn't repair Murongyu's soul and body. In the blink of an eye, Murongyu's body was almost torn apart. Relatively speaking, his body was better. However, Murong Yu's soul space, including the endless soul sea and soul energy, had been crushed and turned into the most primitive state of chaos. With a poof, Murong Yu's soul was also crushed into powder by the terrible power. Everything went black, and Murong Yu's consciousness dissipated. Murong Yu didn't know how much time had passed. It felt like an instant, but it also felt like countless reincarnations had passed. Suddenly, Murong Yu woke up. Am I dead or not? After regaining his consciousness, Murong Yu muttered to himself. Then he jumped in fright. He clearly remembered that his physical body and soul had been minced into powder. Is this the ability of the nirvana of the phoenix? Murong Yu thought to himself and started to check his body. However, his expression soon turned to one of astonishment. Not only am I not dead, but I have also made a breakthrough. My soul has probably reached the level of 8 stars. Moreover, apart from his soul, his physical body and cultivation seem to have improved as well. What the hell is going on? Murong Yu looked at his body and soul in confusion. Moreover, he could feel that the nirvana of the phoenix didn't reduce the number of resurrections. In other words, he didn't die this time. In other words, he was already dead, but he was resurrected in another way. Chapter 1770. Shock. Shock. And it was ecstasy. Seeing that his soul had broken through to 8-star level, Murong Yu couldn't help but laugh wildly. When he was a 7-star soul, Murong Yu's soul sea had already reached a radius of 1 billion miles. Now, it had increased by 10 times and reached a radius of 10 billion miles. Moreover, this incomparably huge soul sea was filled with soul power that contained incomparably terrifying power. The soul power gave Murong Yu a huge surprise. The storage of the soul power was 10 times more than before, but the power was 100 times more than before. Why was that? It wasn't just because the soul power had increased, but also because the soul power was purer than before and had been compressed by several times. If it wasn't compressed, the current soul power would have been 100 times more than before. Murong Yu's physical body had only reached the peak of chaotic ancestor sage before this. Although it hadn't broken through to the level of a supreme weapon, it had taken a step forward. However, he still took a step forward, becoming even more powerful than before, reaching half a step into the supreme being level. It could be said to be a half-step supreme weapon. In addition, Murong Yu's cultivation had broken through again and had reached the level of a 5th-rank chaotic ancestor sage. His cultivation had skyrocketed again. His ranking on the holy list had also skyrocketed by 10,000 and reached the 60th place. However, the ranking on the holy list didn't match his strength at all. Now, Murong Yu didn't care about the ranking on the holy list, because with his current strength, the top expert on the holy list was definitely no match for him. Because an 8-star soul could already kill an ordinary supreme. Although Murong Yu had just reached an 8-star soul, an 8-star soul was already the highest level of a soul sage. Compared to an ordinary level, an 8-star soul was equivalent to a supreme, and a 9-star soul had already reached the supreme. That was extremely terrifying. As long as Murong Yu upgraded to a 9-star soul, even if the heavens came personally, Murong Yu wouldn't be afraid. However, breaking through to an 8-star soul had already brought Murong Yu back from the brink of death. Whether he could break through to a 9-star soul was still a question. At the very least, an 8-star soul was enough for Murong Yu. A 9-star soul was just an extravagant hope for him. Supreme of the demon race? The sovereign of the sacred race? A cold light flashed in Murong Yu's eyes. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already inside the Heavenly Demoness Heavenly Demon Palace. Heavenly Demoness, open the demonic palace. I'm coming out. Murong Yu said in a deep voice. Then, the door of the demonic palace was opened. Immediately, the 2 women appeared in front of Murong Yu, their faces pale and bloodless. Gentlemen, I'm sorry. I couldn't control myself and hurt you. Murong Yu immediately apologized. At the same time, a terrifyingly powerful life force surged into Shao Zi and the heavenly enchantress like a flood, rapidly repairing their bodies and souls. In just a short while, the two of them had recovered from their injuries. However, the heavenly enchantress would need time to recover the power she had lost. As for the blood essence she had lost, it would take an extremely long time to recover. Heavenly enchantress, I'll remember your kindness. As long as I don't die, I'll definitely repay you 1,000 times in the future. Morong came in front of the heavenly enchantress and said formally, "Umph." The heavenly enchantress scoffed and rolled her eyes at Morong. Just remember what you said today. If there's nothing else, you can leave now. I'm going to sleep. Morong nodded and expressed his gratitude again before leaving. Morong couldn't help the heavenly enchantress with her current situation. However, as he had said, as long as he didn't die and the heavenly enchantress didn't die, he would repay the heavenly enchantress greatly. Thus, Morong brought Shao Zi into the Hichu Luoshu and teleported out of the heavenly demon secret realm. After Morong and Jian Wushuang left, the entire heavenly demon secret realm let out a series of earth-shattering rumbles. After a while, the entire heavenly demon secret realm disappeared. It must have been completely shut down by the heavenly enchantress. After all, she needed a long time to recover the blood essence she had lost. During this period of time, she couldn't be discovered or disturbed by anyone. When Morong reappeared, he appeared in Tiangang Mountain. However, the Big Dipper Mountain had already turned into ruins. It had only been a few days since he went to look for the heavenly enchantress. In just a few days, the human race was annihilated. Morong face was extremely gloomy. He immediately used the holy world's origin energy to cover the entire human race's territory. However, what he saw was a scene of devastation. The mountains were flattened and the rivers were filled. The human race's territory, which used to be beautiful and full of heaven and earth's origin energy, was now in ruins. These bastards! Morong gritted his teeth. One had to know that although he had almost annihilated the demon race previously, he didn't destroy the demon race's territory. After all, these territories belong to the holy world and everyone. For example, the human race had been annihilated. Even if the human race came out, it wasn't suitable for them to live. There wasn't enough heaven and earth's origin energy. If they wanted to increase their strength, they would need thousands or even tens of thousands of times more time. The demon race and the holy race wanted to destroy the human race's roots. Moreover, what Morong couldn't understand was why the demon race and the holy race wanted to annihilate other races. They wanted to take over the other race's territory and expand their own territory. Why did they want to destroy such a large territory of the human race? In fact, what Morong didn't know was that this wasn't what the demon race and the holy world wanted. It was completely caused by the two supreme beings venting their anger. They were supreme beings. Under normal circumstances, they lived outside the realm. What did the holy world have to do with them? However, they didn't even kill a single human after making such a big fuss. They didn't even know where Morong was hiding. How could they not be angry? In their anger, they could only destroy the human race's territory to vent their anger. With a gloomy expression, Morong hurriedly communicated with his clone and received some information. His clone's strength had broken through again. In the entire dragon race, his strength had already rushed into the top 10. He could be considered one of the core members of the dragon race. Because of the special nature of the dragon world, the dragon race didn't participate in any wars. Of course, the holy race's supreme being wanted to control the dragon race. However, he didn't even know where the dragon world was, so he could only give up. Apart from the dragon race, everyone else was forced to surrender to the supreme being's strength. They formed a new alliance with the supreme being as the leader. Even the angel race and the demon race were forced to become part of the holy race alliance. This couldn't be helped. Previously, even Morong couldn't resist the supreme being, let alone Yang, Hao, and Xianhua. As for the demon race, apart from the supreme being, there are only a few hundred saint rankers and a few 100 million ordinary demon race experts. As long as the supreme being of the demon race was dealt with, the others were nothing to worry about. After getting a general understanding, Murong Yu was about to return to the immemorial world. However, at this moment, his clone sent him another piece of bad news. After the first two supreme beings of the demon race and the holy race, there seemed to be more supreme beings coming down. These supreme beings seemed to have something important to do when they returned to the holy world. They kept asking about Murong Yu's whereabouts. However, these people were very secretive. Murong Yu's clone didn't know how many of them came down. After all, although the dragon race was strong, they weren't a match for those supreme beings. Therefore, he didn't dare to inquire too much about this information. More supreme beings came down? Did they all come down because of my physique? Murong Yu's face darkened. Although his soul had broken through to the 8-star level, he could barely deal with the most ordinary supreme beings. If there were more supreme beings, he wouldn't be a match. The most important thing was that he could only fight against ordinary supreme beings with his soul. His cultivation couldn't be compared to supreme beings. If he couldn't kill them in one blow, it would be extremely difficult for Murong Yu to escape. With a gloomy face, Murong Yu finally returned to the immemorial world with little Z. The human race didn't suffer any losses. In fact, it could be said that they didn't suffer any losses. This made Murong Yu feel relieved. After discovering that Murong Yu had returned, the entire human race cheered. Although these people couldn't worship Murong Yu like Shenzhen's disciples, they were unconditionally obedient. At least now, almost everyone was starting to believe in Murong Yu. Murong Yu had no choice but to take a stroll around the immemorial realm to encourage the humans. Then, he returned to the main hall of the Human Race Alliance. After listening to the situation of the past few days, Murong Yu fell silent. The human race was still too weak. They weren't a match for the holy race and the demon race. As a pseudo-supreme being, his strength wasn't that great. Holy Master, could it be that the entire human race can only hole up in the immemorial world in the future? An expert on the saint ranking of the Human Race Alliance couldn't help but jump out and ask. Although the immemorial world was extremely vast, it was more than enough for the human race to live here. After all, it wasn't the holy world. The human race preferred to live in the holy world. A cold light flashed in Murong Yu's eyes. Of course not. Isn't it just a supreme being? Even if it's a supreme being, I can kill him. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. They all looked at each other. However, they quickly came to their senses, and their faces were filled with excitement. It was the expert on the saint ranking who spoke earlier. He looked at Murong Yu excitedly. Holy Master, could it be that you've broken through and become a supreme being? The others also looked at Murong Yu with burning eyes. They were full of anticipation. How they wanted to see Murong Yu nod or say yes. However, Murong Yu didn't break through at all. It seemed that they were destined to be disappointed. However, Murong Yu already had a series of plans in his mind. Chapter 1771. Murong Yu's plan wasn't complicated. He only wanted to kill a supreme being, regardless of whether it was a supreme being from the demonic race or the holy race. He didn't know why these supreme beings would descend without fear of the heavens, but they were all his enemies. They were the biggest obstacle to him unifying the holy world. Furthermore, the supreme beings that descended later might have descended because of him. Even if Murong Yu didn't make a move, those supreme beings would find him. Hence, Murong Yu had to kill a supreme being to make an example out of them. When everyone knew that Murong Yu had the ability to do so, they were all stunned. Then, they were all overjoyed. So what if Murong Yu wasn't a supreme being? He had the ability to kill a supreme being. If Murong Yu could really kill a supreme being, the other supreme beings would have a lot to worry about. Because both sides had supreme beings, the demonic race and the holy race didn't fight. This was because they all knew that even if they were to engage in a great battle, it would be impossible to determine the outcome of the battle in a short period of time when the number of supreme being experts was about the same. Moreover, the supreme beings that descended later didn't have the mission to help the holy race or the demonic race unify the holy world. Every race had two supreme beings. In other words, there were 4 ordinary supreme beings in the holy world. Only the human race had Muronyu, a fake supreme being. Heavenly Demon Mountain, Celestial Palace. Lord Supreme Being, this little one has something to report. A demonic race expert on the saint rankings turned into a streak of light as he tore through the void. He quickly appeared outside the Celestial Palace and bowed respectfully. Yao Tian opened his eyes and frowned slightly. He said indifferently, "Come in." Thus, the demonic race expert on the saint rankings walked in. "Is there news about Muronyu?" Yao Tian looked at the saint rankings expert, causing the latter to break out in cold sweat. Yao Tian was naturally the first supreme being to descend. Ever since he destroyed Tiangang Mountain with the holy race's supreme being, he had returned to Heavenly Demon Mountain. However, he had sent all the demonic race's forces to investigate Murongyu's whereabouts. Yes, the demonic race expert bowed again and lowered his head at the same time. A glint flashed across Yao Tian's eyes as a look of pleasant surprise flashed across his eyes. "Hurry up and tell me." "Lord, I'm not sure where Muronyu is right now." Yao Tian's face darkened, and a terrifying murderous aura's bodies as his body. However, before he could act up, the expert continued. "However, there's been a piece of news circulating in the Saints' world recently. Is herds SSSSS? He SSSS? Heat T S to S? S's S's. At the same time, his eyes flashed with murderous intent and fury. Pong! At this moment, the throne beneath him exploded and was blasted into smithereens. One could only imagine how furious he was right now. He didn't challenge Huatai. He actually challenged me? Good. Very good. Yao Tian was infuriated. Muronyu was just a sage. What right did he have to challenge him? Why did he spread the news to the entire world? Why did he challenge Yao Tian? Wasn't this indirectly saying that Yao Tian was a pushover? After all, the pushover had to be taken advantage of. Muronyu was obviously looking down on Yao Tian. In fact, Muronyu really did have such thoughts. Yao Tian was the weakest of the 4 supreme beings in the holy world. It was only natural that Muronyu would choose him. Furthermore, he was the first person to descend to the holy world. He had a grudge with Muronyu. So Muronyu could only choose him. Time? Location? Although Yao Tian was furious, he laughed coldly after calming down. Hadn't he always wanted to find Muronyu? Now that Muronyu had delivered himself to him, wasn't it even better? As long as he killed Muronyu, he would be able to possess Murongyu's body. Once he succeeded, would he still be afraid of the sovereign of the heavens? Half a year later, demons subduing mountain range. The expert on the demon race's saint rankings said. Yao Tian snorted coldly again, and an even more terrifying murderous intent emerged from his body. Demons subduing mountain range. Demons subduing mountain range. Muronyu clearly chose this place to suppress the demon race, or even to exterminate them. Spread the word that I will accept this challenge. Tell Muronyu to prepare a coffin. I will personally kill him in half a year. Yao Tian snorted coldly. The expert on the demon race's saint rankings immediately left the celestial palace. A day later, the news of Yao Tian accepting the challenge had spread. In less than a day, the news had spread throughout the entire holy world. At the same time, a large number of experts had already rushed towards the demon subduing mountain range. Of course, most of these people were from the holy race. There were also some from the demon race. As for the human race's sages, none of them appeared. This was because they were all in the immemorial world. Without Murongyu's permission, they were unable to leave the immemorial world. After all, both the demon race and the holy race were targeting the human race. The moment they saw a human race in the holy world, they would definitely kill them. The human race would only be courting death if they left. Muronyu was only doing this for their own good. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Muronyu prepared to set off. Within the great hall of the human race's alliance, many of the core experts of the alliance were gathered. Master, are you really not going to bring us along? You're going alone? Gukai gloomily blocked Murongyu's path and asked in a deep voice. Morong Yu was going to keep the appointment. However, other than Little Purple and Little White, he did not bring anyone else. There was a reason for bringing Little Purple and Little White. Because of Little Purple's uniqueness, she could even travel freely through the Hichu Luo Shu. With such an innate ability, even a supreme being would not be able to kill her easily. As for Little White, he also understood the laws of space and could create a spatial tunnel at any time. He could help Morong Yu gain a chance to escape. As for the others, some of their strength was not bad, but they were all on the holy rankings. Compared to a supreme being, they were nothing. If they were to go and Morong Yu was defeated, then they'd all be implicated as collateral damage. In fact, Morong Yu did not dare to guarantee that the other three supreme beings would not intervene. Therefore, he only brought 2 people who could help him. He did not bring anyone else, so that he would not be distracted. Gu Kai, our strength is not enough to help your master, so we cannot distract him. Zhao Jiqing spoke at this time. Gu Kai immediately nodded. He was very respectful towards Zhao Jiqing, his master's wife. He immediately retreated and did not say another word. Although you can't go to the scene, you can use the special communication amulet I gave you to watch my battle from afar. Moreover, don't forget that I have the Phoenix Nirvana technique. It's impossible for those supreme beings to completely destroy me. Morong Yu glanced at everyone, then took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. At this time, the demon-subduing mountain was already surrounded by countless demon clan and sacred clan saints. Looking from afar, it was a sea of people. It was very lively. Morong Yu, that coward, probably doesn't dare to come, right? Seeing that the day of the battle was gradually passing, but Morong Yu was nowhere to be seen, a demon clan expert on the holy rankings could not help but mock. Haha, maybe Morong Yu knows that he's no match for the supreme being, so he doesn't dare to come. I think Morong Yu doesn't even dare to come. He's just trying to please the crowd. What right does a mere sage have to challenge a supreme being? He's overestimating himself. Maybe he's tired of living? Is he purposely challenging a supreme being? As time passed, Morong Yu still did not appear. As a result, the surrounding crowd grew impatient and began to mock and ridicule Morong Yu one after another. In the end, even Yao Tian became impatient. Hearing the crowd's words, Yao Tian also felt that he had been tricked by Morong Yu. Why would Morong Yu challenge him? This was like an ordinary sage challenging the primal chaos ancestor sage. Was this realistic? Perhaps this was not even Morong Yu's idea, but someone else's. Their goal was to trick Yao Tian. Once this thought appeared in his mind, Yao Tian felt that he had been tricked. Thus, the anger in his heart became stronger and stronger. In the end, everyone who was present felt that Morong Yu had tricked them. Thus, they could not help but curse and curse. However, these people did not consider that even if Morong Yu did not accept the challenge, what did it have to do with them? It was not like Morong Yu had invited them here. They had come of their own accord. Morong Yu, this bastard, how dare you trick me? He's asking for it. There was only an hour left until the appointed day. However, Morong Yu had not appeared yet, and Yao Tian was finally sure that he had been tricked. Haha, Yao Tian, you're still so stupid. You didn't even confirm before coming. You deserve to be tricked. At this moment, someone was especially happy. That person was the supreme being of the holy tribe, Hua Tai. Yao Tian was enraged. He was already angry enough that he had been tricked by Morong Yu. Now, Hua Tai was adding fuel to the fire. In an instant, his anger erupted. His right fist suddenly burst out and blasted towards Hua Tai with incomparable speed and ferocity. Hua Tai sneered. Just as he was about to attack, a mocking voice sounded. Tiske. Looks like I'm late. Why don't you guys fight first? Wait until the winner is decided before it's my turn? At the same time, a figure appeared on the demon-subduing mountain. It was a black-robed youth from the human tribe with a faint smile on his face. Morong Yu. When he saw the black-robed youth, one of the experts on the demon tribe's holy ranking exclaimed, "Who else could this black-robed youth be but Morong Yu?" Chapter 1772. At the last moment, Morong Yu had finally arrived. Morong Yu, I thought you wouldn't dare to come. Yao Tian stopped his attack on Prime Hua Tai and turned to look at Murongyu with a mocking expression as he sneered. There are two reasons for this. His strength was about the same as Huatai's. Even if they fought, it wouldn't be a decisive battle. The other reason was that Murongyu was his true opponent. As long as he killed Murongyu and took over his body, he wouldn't have to be afraid of anyone. Therefore, as he spoke, Yao Tian's immense divine consciousness had already enveloped Murongyu. Murongyu stood in the sky and looked at Yao Tian with a smile. His soul had already reached the heaven-defying level of 8 stars. It was equivalent to the honorable realm. Although he was only a rank 5 chaotic ancestor sage, an ordinary honorable's aura was no longer effective on him. Therefore, Murongyu didn't feel anything when Yao Tian's aura suppressed him. After taking a deep look at Yao Tian, Murongyu shifted his gaze away from him and slowly swept it across the crowd. Then he squinted his eyes slightly. As I expected, other than Yao Tian and Huatai, there are 2 more honorables lying in ambush nearby. Murongyu laughed coldly in his heart. The other 2 honorables from the demon race and the Holy Clan had suppressed their cultivation levels and disguised themselves as ordinary sages from the Holy Clan and the demon race. Although they had suppressed their cultivation levels, they couldn't suppress the intense light that they emitted. In Murongyu's eyes, the 2 of them were like the sun among the dim stars. They were so dazzling and eye-catching. Murongyu could confirm their identities with a single glance. However, Murongyu pretended that he didn't notice anything. His gaze didn't even linger on them. Finally, Murongyu's gaze landed on Yao Tian. Yao Tian, why are you in such a hurry? Don't the main characters only appear at the last moment? I'm not in a hurry, so why are you in a hurry? The eunuch is more worried than the emperor. Upon hearing Murongyu's words, Yao Tian almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Murongyu's words had 2 meanings. One was that Murongyu was the main character, while Yao Tian was just a supporting character. There was another reason that made him want to vomit blood. Murongyu was the emperor, and he was just a little eunuch by the emperor's side. These words were truly incomparably insidious. Yao Tian was so infuriated that he gritted his teeth and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Murongyu, cut the crap. Have you prepared the coffin? If you're ready, then prepare to die. Yao Tian roared and took a step forward. Suddenly, a terrifying aura erupted from his body like a storm, sweeping towards Murongyu like a tide. Bang! 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 Murongyu was fine, but the sages from the demon race and the holy race who were near Yao Tian were in for a tragedy. All of them were caught off guard and were sent flying. Some of them even spat out a mouthful of blood, and their physical bodies and souls were almost shattered. This was only because of the aura that was released. Otherwise, all of them would have been killed. At the same time, Yao Tian's fist, which was the size of a small mountain, punched out. It tore through space and time as it charged towards Murongyu. He wanted to kill Murongyu with a single punch. Good timing. Murongyu laughed out loud. He took a step forward and grabbed at the air with his right hand. In the next moment, the Xianyuan sword appeared in his hand. At this moment, Murongyu's soul sea, which had a radius of 10 billion miles, started to surge like a tsunami. Streaks of immense soul power surged out and burned, increasing the power of the Xianyuan sword. At the same time, Murongyu had also increased his strength to the maximum. Incomparably violent power surged from his palm into the Xianyuan sword like a torrent. Clang! The Xianyuan sword trembled violently, bursting out with a clear clang. At the same time, a blinding rainbow light shot out from the Xianyuan sword and into the sky. Rainbow light. Yao Tian and the other 3 supreme beings narrowed their eyes when they saw the Xianyuan sword emitting a 7-colored radiance. They knew what the 7-colored holy light represented. It was the light that was unique to a ruler's weapon. In other words, the long sword in Murongyu's hand was a ruler's weapon. Who was this Murongyu? Why was there such a good opportunity? Why did he get all the good stuff? What other treasures did he have? If I can kill him, then everything he has will be mine. In an instant, the greed in the hearts of Yao Tian and the other 3 supreme beings soared as they looked at Murongyu with burning gazes. In fact, they weren't the only ones. The ordinary sages around them all had the same look in their eyes. All of them looked as if they wanted to swallow Murong-yu whole. "Kill!" Murong-yu roared. At the same time, he wielded the Xianyuan sword with both hands and swung it at Yao Tian's incoming fist. His aura had already reached its peak. In the blink of an eye, before the surrounding people could even see it clearly, the attacks of the two had already collided in the void. Poof! There was no earth-shattering explosion, nor was there any dazzling explosion of holy light. After hearing a muffled sound, everyone saw an incomparably huge palm rapidly descending from the sky. Then it fell to the ground with a plop. Everyone's eyes instantly went blank. This was because they saw that the huge palm belonged to Yao Tian Sovereign. In other words, Yao Tian Sovereign's hand had been chopped off by Murong-yu. A rank 5 chaotic ancestor sage had actually chopped off the hand of Supremes. What was going on? Was Yao Tian, a supreme being, too weak, or was Murong-yu too powerful? Free! No one would think that Yao Tian's strength was too weak, especially the other three supremes. There was only one explanation. Murong-yu's strength was simply too heaven-defying. He could even kill his supremes. Yao Tian was stunned as well. He couldn't believe that the scene before him was real. Even if it had really happened, he still couldn't believe it. Great! The Holy Master is too strong. After Murong-yu chopped off Yao Tian's hand, a loud cheer came from the Human Race Alliance in the immemorial world. In the Great Hall of the Human Race Alliance, all the experts of the Human Race Alliance who were qualified to enter the Great Hall were gathered here. A huge crystal screen appeared in front of the hall. The screen showed the scene of Murong-yu fighting Yao Tian on Demon, subduing Mountain. These were all transmitted through Murong-yu's special means. They were being broadcasted simultaneously. How could the Human Race Alliance not be happy when they saw Murong-yu's strength? However, they only cheered for a short while before they stared at the screen again. Whoosh! After severing Yao Tian's hand, the Xianyuan sword did not stop at all. It sliced through space and time with lightning speed, heading straight for Yao Tian's head. Once Yao Tian's head was chopped off, Murong-yu was sure that Yao Tian would die. However, as a Supremes, how could Yao Tian be killed so easily? That was impossible. I was just careless. How can this ant be my match? Yao Tian's sovereign finally reacted. He muttered in his heart, but on the surface, he was already grinning. With a thought, the hand that was chopped off grew back. Then, it formed a fist and charged towards Murong-yu again. Little bastard, I didn't even use my strength just now. Try and chop off my hand again. So what if I give it a try? Murong-yu laughed insolently as he slashed his sword at Yao Tian's incoming fist. There was nothing he could do about it. Yao Tian's speed was just too fast. If Murong-yu didn't slash back, he would be killed by Yao Tian's fist before the Xianyuan sword could even reach him. Clang! In the blink of an eye, the two's attacks collided in the void again. However, unlike before, Yao Tian's hand wasn't chopped off. Only an earth-shattering sound could be heard. Ordinary sages, even those on the sage rankings, couldn't see what was going on. However, the other three supreme beings saw everything clearly. The moment the two clashed, Murong-yu's sword was sent flying by Yao Tian's fist. In fact, the frightening power even shattered Murong-yu's arm. Whoosh! Murong-yu had no choice but to retreat quickly to disperse the force of Yao Tian's attack. However, Yao Tian only paused for a moment before he took a step forward and charged towards Murong-yu again. At the same time, Yao Tian's other hand reached out and grabbed the Xianyuan sword that had been sent flying. Phew! At this moment, the ordinary sages from the Holy Clan and Devil Clan finally saw what was going on. Then, they heaved a sigh of relief. Yao Tian's current performance was that of a true Supremes. Although Murong-yu was strong, that was all there was to it. Unlike the Holy Clan and Devil Clan, the experts from the Human Clan Alliance in the immemorial world had a different reaction. When they saw Murong-yu being sent flying, their hearts were in their mouths, and their faces were filled with worry. Holy Master, do your best. You can definitely do it. Isn't he just an ordinary Supremes? You will definitely be able to kill him. At this moment, a female expert on the sage rankings suddenly said in a low voice, as if she was praying, "Holy Master, do your best." After this female sage, the others also began to pray for Murongyu. In just a few breaths' time, all the sages in the hall began to pray for Murongyu. Everyone was of one mind. While they were praying, they didn't notice that an inexplicable power was being emitted from their bodies. Then, it slowly rose into the air and finally condensed above them with the inexplicable power emitted by the others. Then this force traversed through time and space and shot towards Murongyu in the demon subduing mountain. Chapter 1773. Boom, boom, boom. After gaining the upper hand in his attack, Yao Tian took advantage of the opportunity to charge forward. Fist after fist flew towards Murongyu in an incomparably violent manner. In a breath's time, Yao Tian had already thrown over 1,000,000 punches. The terrifying power even caused the surrounding void to collapse. Murongyu snorted coldly. The Xian Yuan sword disappeared into the void and reappeared in his hand in a flash. Kill! Murongyu roared furiously. The Xian Yuan sword in his hand unleashed streaks of terrifying sword radiance towards Yao Tian's attacks. Bang! 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 However, the difference in power between a sage and a supreme being was too great. Although Murongyu was powerful, he still had to use hundreds of weapons to barely shatter a single punch from Yao Tian. However, Yao Tian could throw over 1,000,000 punches in a breath's time. There was no way Murongyu could withstand it. As such, Murongyu could only retreat as he fought. This was one of Murongyu's plans. He could not use his soul attack to kill Yao Tian here. This was because there were still 3 supreme beings hiding in the dark. They would definitely attack. Murongyu's plan was to lure Yao Tian a certain distance away, then kill him. This way, Murongyu would have enough time to escape. Otherwise, once the other 3 supreme beings attacked, Murongyu would not even have the chance to escape. Soul Storm. Murongyu roared in his heart. The Soul Storm exploded. However, the Soul Storm was not very powerful. It was only at the level of 7-star sage. Even so, it still gave Yao Tian a shock. In the blink of an eye, Yao Tian protected his soul and blocked Murongyu's attack. Soul attacks are only SOSO. Yao Tian sneered. However, his expression changed very quickly. He had blocked Murongyu's soul attack. However, the nearby saints of the demon race and sacred race did not have such powerful abilities. A large number of people had their souls crushed and died an unnatural death. The people from the sacred race were fine since they had nothing to do with Yao Tian. However, the deaths of the demon race's saints had infuriated Yao Tian. This was because there weren't many demonic beasts left in the sacred world in the first place. Every death meant one less demonic beast. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before Yao Tian became a general without an army. Die! Yao Tian howled in rage. With a thunderous boom, an even more terrifying aura erupted from his body as he ruthlessly punched towards Murongyu. Yao Tian was enraged. This Murongyu is in for a tragedy. Not far away, Huatai Supreme narrowed his eyes and sneered in his heart. At the same time, he took a step forward and approached Murongyu and Demon Sky Sovereign. At the same time, the other 2 supreme beings who were hiding in the crowd did the same. Gradually, they approached Murongyu and his companion. Murongyu's pupils abruptly shrank. Yao Tian was more powerful, and this made him feel a little pressured. However, if he unleashed his full strength, he should be able to kill Yao Tian. However, the actions of the other 3 supreme beings made him feel even more pressured. If the 3 of them attacked at the same time, Murongyu wouldn't even have the time to enter Hichu Luo Shu. Boom! In a flash, Murongyu had already slashed down with his sword. However, he was already no match for Yao Tian. This time it was the same. On the contrary, Yao Tian's attack was even more terrifying. It actually tore his physical body apart. Die! Yao Tian howled in rage as he stretched out his hand and grabbed towards Murongyu. He wanted to capture Murongyu. Run! Although Murongyu's physical body was torn apart, it wasn't destroyed. Without any explanation, he unleashed his greatest speed and broke through the void as he quickly escaped into the distance. Using the army character formula, Murong Yu's body shuttled through the endless space at an extremely fast speed. This made Yao Tian and the other three supreme beings speechless. This was because Murong Yu's speed was about the same as theirs. Whoosh! Yao Tian chased after him and attacked as he chased. However, Murong Yu had already distanced himself from him. Furthermore, his speed was about the same as Yao Tian's. This caused most of his attacks to miss. However, those attacks that didn't miss caused Murong Yu a lot of trouble. He had to use all his strength to barely block them. However, his blood was churning and he spat out blood. At this moment, Hua Tai and the other two supreme beings didn't chase after him immediately. They hesitated for a moment before they slowly caught up. They kept a certain distance from Murong Yu and his companion. It's about time. Murong Yu's eyes flashed with terrifying killing intent as he shuttled through the endless space. It was at this moment that he suddenly came to a stop. He turned around to face Yao Tian, who was shooting towards him with a strange smile on his face. Yao Tian was stunned. He instinctively felt that something wasn't right. However, his desire to kill Murong Yu grew stronger. That strange feeling only flashed in his heart for a moment before he forcefully suppressed it. 8-star soul, holy soul, slash. Murong Yu roared in his heart. In the next instant, he raised his 8-star soul spirit to the maximum. Then he condensed a soul spirit battle blade and slashed it fiercely at Yao Tian, who was shooting toward him. The instant Murong Yu made his move, Yao Tian instinctively sensed danger. In an instant, his scalp went numb. However, before he could react effectively, the soul blade had slashed down viciously, directly slashing his soul and shattering it. Yao Tian let out an earth-shattering scream, and then he flipped over and fell to the ground. At the same time, his powerful life aura was rapidly dissipating from his body. Yao Tian had been killed. Murong Yu heaved a sigh of relief. He reached out his hand and was about to grab Yao Tian's body. However, at this moment, his expression changed. Yao Tian's life aura, which had been rapidly dissipating, suddenly surged. In an instant, he had recovered to his peak. At the same time, Yao Tian stood up and looked coldly at Murong Yu. "Little bastard, do you know that you've wasted a chance to revive my soul?" Yao Tian was furious. He was beyond furious. Originally, he was indeed dead. His soul had been destroyed. However, in his early years, he had accidentally swallowed a heaven-earth fruit when he was wandering outside. That heaven-earth fruit didn't have any other use. Its only use was to protect his soul once. It was because of that heaven-earth fruit that his soul had been destroyed. However, it quickly recovered. This was the same principle as the Phoenix clan's Phoenix Nirvana. However, the Phoenix Nirvana gave him multiple chances to revive. Murong Yu was shocked. However, he quickly reacted. Holy Soul slash. He slashed down again. However, Yao Tian was already prepared. Although Murong Yu's soul had reached the level of an 8-star, it was only equivalent to an ordinary honorable martial artist. Hence, although he had destroyed Yao Tian's defense and shaken his soul, he couldn't destroy his soul. The furious Yao Tian's strength surged once again. He had already reached his peak. Boom! Just one move. Murong Yu, who wasn't far from him, was instantly reduced to dust. However, Murong Yu's soul had managed to escape and wasn't destroyed. However, Yao Tian didn't intend to let Murong Yu go. He reached out with his claw again and slashed at Murong Yu's soul. At this moment, Hua Tai and the other two, who had been tailing Yao Tian from afar, also increased their speed and charged forward. They were all prepared to snatch Murong Yu's body. It's over, Murong Yu thought to himself. However, he wasn't someone who would just sit there and wait for death. He started to retreat frantically and reform his physical body at the same time. However, Yao Tian's speed was simply too fast. If Murong Yu still had his physical body, he might have a chance of escaping. However, in his soul form, his speed was far inferior to Yao Tian's. Furthermore, He couldn't reform his physical body before Yao Tian attacked his soul. If I can't escape, then I'll just die. After all, I still have a chance to revive. Being able to resurrect after death is better than being captured by him. Murong Yu hardened his heart and made his decision. At this moment, in the immemorial world, many core members of the Human Race Alliance were praying devoutly. The more danger Murong Yu was in, the more devout their prayers were. The more devout they prayed, the stronger the mysterious power. It was slowly growing stronger. Whoosh! Just as Murong Yu's soul was about to be captured by Yao Tian, Hua Tai and the other two holy race sovereigns were about to make a move as well. The other demon race sovereign was about to stop Hua Tai and the other demon race sovereign. However, right at this moment, Murong Yu, who was in his spiritual state, felt an extremely unfamiliar yet extremely powerful energy enter his soul out of thin air. With a whoosh, the speed of his soul increased exponentially. In an instant, the distance between him and Yao Tian increased. At the same time, because of the mysterious power, Murong Yu's physical body instantly reformed. It was 100 times faster than when he was at his peak. What a powerful force! Murong Yu was stunned by the foreign power that had suddenly entered his body. However, now wasn't the time to be shocked. He needed to escape or kill Yao Tian. His instincts told him that if he could combine his soul attack with the mysterious power that had entered his body, he would definitely be able to kill Yao Tian. He could do it. While Yao Tian was still in a daze, Murong Yu launched another attack. Furthermore, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to kill Yao Tian. Hence, he added a large amount of the mysterious power to his soul attack. Little bastard, you still want to... Seeing Murong Yu launch another soul attack, Yao Tian sneered at Murong Yu with disdain. However, his smile quickly froze. There was no other reason. At this moment, his soul had already been destroyed and turned into dust. Chapter 1774. Before Murong Yu's soul had broken through to an 8-star soul, he could reverse space-time and send someone back to the past. However, he could only send someone back within one era. He couldn't do it any further. However, after he broke through to an 8-star soul, his ability to reverse space-time had increased tremendously. He broke through the restriction of an era and reached the terrifying stage of a few eras or even 10 eras. Moreover, it was only the beginning. As Murong Yu's strength continued to increase, his ability to reverse space-time would become stronger. In the end, it wasn't impossible to reverse space-time to a reincarnation era. However, Murong Yu's lifespan was only slightly more than one era. He wasn't interested in going back any further. Moreover, apart from the time he could send someone back had increased, Murong Yu's ability to reverse space-time had also improved. Previously, he could only sustain it for a year. Now he could sustain it for 10,000 years. 10,000 years was more than enough time for many people, including Murong Yu. At that moment, he had returned to the Great Xia dynasty from an era ago. However, he had returned a little too early. At that time, the head of the Murong family was still a kid. Murong family's head was still a kid. Murong Yu wanted to see his parents from an earlier time. However, Murong Yu didn't allow himself to return to the current space-time. Therefore, even though he was sitting cross-legged on top of Murong family's head, no one noticed him. After all, regardless of whether it was the Murong family or the Great Xia dynasty, they were only secular forces. They weren't even cultivators, so it was impossible for them to notice the existence of Murong Yu, a pseudo-supreme being. Murong Yu watched the continuous development of the Murong family like a bystander. He watched the head of the Murong family go through a series of battles and finally become the head of the Murong family. Along the way, Murong Yu saw too many filthy things. Murong Yu could not help but sigh. Whether it was the secular world, the cultivation world, or even the saints' world, there were all sorts of conflicts. However, what made Murong Yu more gratified was that his forces would not have this kind of struggle for power or resources. Everyone in Murong's family, including the direct and collateral relatives, was being observed by Murong Yu, because he didn't know which one was his father and which one was his mother. If a few decades had passed, a little boy would have finally grown into a young man. In Murong Yu's eyes, this young man slowly overlapped with the vague image of his father in his memory. Murong Yu knew that this young man was his father. However, his father's personality was similar to his. They were both straightforward. However, it was precisely because of this that his father did not have a good life in Murong's family and was even bullied by many people. In addition, his father's aptitude wasn't very good, so the increase in his strength was limited. What Murong's family valued was strength. Murong Yu's father didn't have much strength and was gradually marginalized. Under Murong Yu's gaze, his father got married very quickly. The marriage partner was naturally Murong Yu's mother. Although the memories in his mind were extremely vague, Murong Yu was still a little excited when he saw his parents get married. At one point, Murong Yu couldn't resist the urge to go out and meet them. But in the end, he resisted. If he jumped out, he would probably scare these people and Murong's family to death. Moreover, if he went out, it would definitely have a huge impact on the current space-time. If something went wrong, the trajectory of that space-time would change. In the end, no one knew if Murong Yu still existed in that world. Therefore, Murong Yu didn't dare to act rashly. After a few years of marriage, they still didn't have the fruit of love. In addition, Murong Yu's father's strength couldn't be increased. At this time, they had been completely marginalized and reduced to a branch family in Murong's family that was only slightly better than the ordinary servants. Murong Yu, who had been sitting cross-legged in the sky above Murong's house, suddenly narrowed his eyes, because just now, he clearly saw a baby appear out of thin air in front of his parents' room. This person can't be me, right? Murong Yu's heart skipped a beat and looked at the baby. Perhaps feeling Murong Yu's gaze, the baby also looked over and finally made eye contact with Murong Yu. Then, Murong Yu saw a smile on the baby's face. At that time, I actually saw me from the future. Murong Yu had already determined that the baby was his childhood self. But was he so sharp at that time? Did he see his current self? But how did this baby appear? Murong Yu was sure that he had been watching the entire Murong's house. Even the slightest movement inside could not be hidden from him. But this baby seemed to have appeared out of thin air, and there was no trace of it. Immediately, Murong Yu's enormous divine mind spread out quickly and enveloped the entire Huaxia cultivation world at that time. But, to his disappointment, he found nothing in the end. How did I appear? Murong Yu felt extremely helpless. Soon, Murong Yu's parents found the baby. In the beginning, the couple was very nervous. They thought that someone had lost their child, so they secretly investigated. But there was no result. In the end, they told the public that the baby was their biological child and named the baby Murong Yu. Sitting cross-legged in the sky above Murong's house, Murong Yu's body shook. This baby is really me. But what puzzled Murong Yu was that when he first appeared, he had the chaotic physique, which was extremely good. At that time, if he had directly cultivated the chaotic celestial body record, he would have been able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. However, as Murong Yu's body gradually grew bigger, the meridians in his body started to clog up. In the end, it became the scene at the beginning of the book. Murong Yu directly became a useless person who could not cultivate. If Hichu Luoshu had not found him, Murong Yu would have been a useless person until he died. However, Murong Yu knew that was impossible. No matter where the person with the chaotic celestial body record was reborn, Hichu Luoshu would search for it and then assist the person with the chaotic celestial body record to enter the cultivation world. This was because Hichu's only task was to assist the person with the chaotic celestial body record to become the most powerful existence in the world, the master of chaos. I'm actually not my parents' biological child. Murong Yu was a little depressed. However, no matter what, he was indebted to his parents for raising him. He would never forget this kindness. Father, Mother, although you've been dead for a long time, I will definitely be able to resurrect you. Murong Yu's eyes flashed, and then he secretly took a strand of his parents' souls. As long as he was strong enough, he could use the power of these souls to resurrect his parents. The second month after Murong Yu's adoption, Murong Yu's mother, Murong, suddenly fell ill and passed away. This illness came very suddenly, and it could be said that there were no signs at all. Even Murong Yu, who was caught unprepared, did not know what had happened. Therefore, he could only watch as his mother passed away. However, at that time, Murong's family members spread the rumor that Murong Yu was an ominous being who had caused his mother's death. In response, Murong Yu only sneered. He would not believe that he had caused his mother's death. However, Murong Yu could not help but be shocked and angry at his father's death. He had still died of an illness. Even Murong Yu did not know the reason. At this time, the entire Murong's family members knew that Murong Yu was an ominous person. He had caused his parents' deaths. At this time, Murong Yu was not even a year old. Although he was now a collateral relative, he was still a member of the Murong's family. Therefore, the Murong's family sent some people to take care of Murong Yu. However, a few people died in succession. Everyone who had taken care of Murong Yu had died. At this time, not to mention the ignorant people in the Murong's family, even Murong Yu believed that he had caused those people's deaths. Therefore, Murong Yu fell into deep thought. He was definitely not an ominous person or an ominous person. Then, there was only one reason that could explain it. Murong Yu's life providence was too strong. The others could not withstand his powerful life providence. Murong Yu had slowly eroded their life providence, and in the end, they suddenly died. Thinking of this, Murong Yu could not help but feel guilty. Therefore, he also took a trace of the souls of the Murong's servants who had died because they had taken care of him. He would revive them in the future. Since they had died because of Murong Yu had a reason to give him a life. Therefore, Murong Yu became the most unwelcome person in the Murong's family. At this moment, Murong Yu finally understood why he was not welcomed in the Murong's family. Apart from the fact that he was trash, it was also because he was an ominous person. Although he still couldn't find out about his parents this time, Murong Yu finally understood the matter that had troubled him for a long time. And since Murong Yu was an ominous person, it was no wonder that the people in the Murong's family didn't like him so much. Could it be that I'm really born and raised by heaven and earth? I don't have parents? Murong Yu pondered in disappointment. Who in this world didn't want to have parents? However, if I'm really born and raised by heaven and earth, why would I appear in the Murong's family? Why would I give it to my adoptive parents? Who is manipulating me? Could it be the endless chaos? Vaguely, Murong Yu once again felt the huge hand that controlled his fate. His current strength was still insufficient, so he could not truly control his own fate. No matter who it is, my fate is mine to control. Murong Yu's eyes flashed with a cold glint. Chapter 1775. Although he didn't gain much this time, at least he saw his parents, even though they weren't his biological parents. Moreover, he also obtained the souls of his parents, so he could revive them in the future. Now it was time for Murong Yu to consider going back. He reversed time and space and returned to the past. It had already been a few decades, and this time was the same as the time he was in. In other words, several decades had passed in the Saint's world as well as several decades in the Saint's world. I wonder if Watai and the other two are still guarding there. Murong Yu sneered. For those who were reversed by Murong Yu, they could only return to where they came from. However, as the person involved, Murong Yu didn't have only one way to return. He could reverse time and space again when he went back and send himself back. Or he could just banish himself and leave this place. Anyway, he had many ways to go back. He didn't have to go back the way he came. If they're still there, I can give them a surprise. Murong Yu sneered in his heart. Then, he disappeared on the spot. Whoosh! In the next moment, Murong Yu returned to the current time and space. However, he didn't appear on Demon Suppression Mountain. But the place where he appeared wasn't too far away from Demon Suppression Mountain. Let's go and take a look. Murong Yu rose into the air and quickly disappeared into the void. Invisibility. Murong Yu was invisible. Using the army word technique, he shuttled through countless time and space. Soon, he arrived on Demon Suppression Mountain and appeared at the place where he reversed time and space. They're still here. Looking at the three supreme beings sitting cross-legged on Demon Suppression Mountain, Murong Yu's eyes flashed with a cold, murderous intent. These people have been guarding here for a few decades. Moreover, Murong Yu realized that the three supreme beings' divine consciousness and power had already covered the entire Demon Suppression Mountain. If Murong Yu didn't know about this and rushed out of the void, he would have been met with an all-out attack from three supreme being experts. Even if Murong Yu was strong, he would definitely not be able to block their attacks. The three of them aren't too close to each other. If I ambush them suddenly and use the inexplicable power that I used last time, I should be able to kill one of them. Murong Yu, who was hiding in the void, had already started thinking. By the way, what kind of power was that last time? Murong Yu frowned. Ever since Murong Yu had exhausted that power, he had not continued to receive that power. Therefore, Murong Yu had not thought of studying that inexplicable power for the past few decades. Hichu, you are experienced and knowledgeable. Do you know what that power is? How did it appear? And how did it appear in my body? Murong Yu pondered for a moment, but still couldn't wrap his head around it. So, he decided to ask the river diagram. If I'm not wrong, that should be the power of faith. Murong Yu was puzzled and asked, what is the power of faith? Was there such a power in this world? I feel like the power of faith is even more powerful than chaotic force. The most powerful power in the world is chaotic force. The key lies in your control. After all, chaotic force can create everything. However, the power of faith does not belong to chaotic force. It should be described as a different system from chaotic force. Murong Yu only nodded slightly. He did not understand the power of faith at all, so he indicated for Hichu to continue. As the name suggests, the power of faith is a power that appears because of faith. What is faith? It's when you have a group of believers or loyal worshippers. In the hearts of these people, you are a supreme existence. You are an omnipotent existence. The more devoted your believers are to you, the more power of faith you will receive. In other words, the power of faith comes from believers. But I've ascended from the cultivation world to the saints' world. I've been the ruler of every world. I should have quite a few believers. But why hasn't the power of faith appeared? Within the Hichu Luo Shu, Hichu transformed into a young man and shook his head. You have believers, but if that's all, you won't be able to produce the power of faith. If you want to produce the power of faith, you have to get their help. The more devoted they are to their prayers, the more power of faith you will receive. Master, if you use it well, you will be the strongest in the saints' world. Even rulers will not be your match. Hichu said to Murong Yu excitedly. What Murong Yu did not know was that although Hichu had heard of the power of faith before, it was far too little. He had never seen it before. The chaotic celestial bodies in the past had not received any power of faith. It could even be said that in the history of the saints' world, the number of people who had received the power of faith could be counted on one hand. Moreover, those people did not know how to use the power of faith or how to strengthen it. The prayers of believers? Murong Yu was somewhat suspicious. As such, he glanced at Hua Tai and the others from afar. Then his figure flashed, and he returned to the immemorial world. Right now, he needed to understand the power of faith. Once he had a large amount of power of faith, killing Hua Tai and the others would be a piece of cake. It would be as simple as killing Yao Tian. Otherwise, if Hua Tai and the others had some sort of life-saving trump card, Murong Yu would not be able to kill them in a single blow. In that case, Murong Yu would be in for a tragedy. However, if he had the support of the power of faith, Murong Yu would be able to kill Hua Tai several times in an instant. Even if he had a heaven-defying resurrection ability like Yao Tian, so what? Murong Yu's return made the entire human race alliance incomparably excited. After all, Murong Yu had disappeared for several decades. One had to know that Murong Yu had already died in the outside world. Of course, Murong Yu's return was still a secret. It could not be spread to the outside world. Otherwise, it would be detrimental to his future plans. Murong Yu gathered the core members of the Human Race Alliance in the main hall and asked directly, when I was fighting Yao Tian, did any of you do anything special? Like praying? Holy Master, how did you know? Back then, when I saw that you were at a disadvantage, we all started praying. We all prayed that you would be able to obtain a complete victory and kill Yao Tian Supreme. One of Shangzhen's experts on the Saint rankings exclaimed. Morong Yu nodded. From the looks of it, the power of faith would only appear when one prayed. However, Morong Yu still wanted to verify it. As such, he said, "Pray again. Be more sincere. I need your prayers." Although everyone did not understand, they would listen to Murong Yu's words unconditionally. As such, everyone started praying sincerely. At the start, Murong Yu did not feel anything. However, the longer they prayed, the more sincere they became. Murong Yu finally discovered traces of almost invisible power of faith appearing in the void. Then it slowly entered his body. As time passed, more and more of this power of faith entered Murong Yu's body. Murong Yu's face was full of radiance, as expected. Although they don't have much power of faith, the power of faith is so strong because of their strength. However, what if the entire human race in Shenzhen and the entire holy world prayed at the same time? What if the entire God realm, 3,000 immortal realms, and 180,000 cultivation realms prayed at the same time? How terrifying would the power of faith they produce be? When he thought of this, Murong Yu could not help but feel excited. Right now, he had completed the most difficult part of obtaining the power of faith. Whether it was the human race in the holy world, the God realm, the immortal realm, or even the cultivation realm, Murong Yu had a certain foundation. Especially in the God realm and the immortal realm, Murong Yu was an overlord-level existence. Countless people were his believers. As long as Murong Yu made use of it, then those people could pray to him and he could obtain faith. After verifying the production of the power of faith, Murong Yu dismissed these puzzled core figures. In the end, only Zhao Jiqing, Murong Xian, Li Ling, Fan Tong, and Murong Yu's relatives and best brothers were left in the hall. It was not that Murong Yu did not want to hide the matter of the power of faith. In fact, even if he said it, it would be extremely difficult for others to obtain the power of faith. However, once the matter of the power of faith was discovered by the enemy, then they would destroy the source of Murong Yu's power of faith. They would even guard against the power of faith. Therefore, Murong Yu only chose to tell his trusted subordinates. Moreover, Murong Yu also needed them to carry out this matter. The power of faith is actually so powerful. In that case, we must obtain the power of faith. After listening to Murong Yu's explanation of the power of faith, Zhao Jiqing and the others were shocked, and Yu Mengxing exclaimed, "The holy world, the God realm, the immortal realm, and even the cultivation realm, we can't let go of them. The population of these worlds is huge, and their power of faith must be terrifying. However, how do we build them? How do we transmit the power of faith?" Mu Liu frowned and said, "Build a statue of Father. Let these statues receive the faith of those people. Then gather the power of faith and transmit it to Father's body." Zhao Jiqing's eyes lit up. "If it's a statue, then I suggest you condense some clones in the statue. If the believers believe in you, you will receive their power of faith, and you can also appear to solve some problems for them. It's mutually beneficial. This way, they will be even more convinced and become even more devout to you." Everyone was taken aback. Then, they couldn't help but look at Zhao Jiqing with admiration. Zhao Jiqing was still the most thoughtful. After all, everything in this world was two-way. Only with effort would there be rewards. If those believers continued to believe in Murong Yu, but didn't receive any benefits, would they still choose to become Murong Yu's believers? No. That way, Murong Yu's believers would decrease. If Murong Yu could help them solve some problems, then they would naturally continue to believe in Murong Yu. Hashtag number 105. Power of faith explodes. After careful discussion, Murong Yu and the others decided to build a large number of statues of Murong Yu in the God realm, the immortal realm, and the cultivation realm. These statues had to be exactly the same as Murong Yu. Each statue contained a sliver of Murong Yu's consciousness and power. In the God realm, the immortal realm, and the cultivation realm, This sliver of consciousness and power was enough for Murong-yu to deal with any unexpected situation. He could also secretly help his believers do things that they wanted. As for the Holy Realm, Murong-yu was only promoting it in the Human Race Alliance and making them his believers. However, Murong-yu didn't force them. They were free to do as they wished. After all, a forced melon was not sweet. Aside from the Holy Realm, Murong-yu didn't take a forceful attitude in the other worlds. Instead, he first developed some believers, then let these believers spread their teachings outside. This was because whether it was the God Realm, the Immortal Realm, or the Cultivation Realm, they were all Murong-yu's world. In these worlds, Shenzhen was the strongest power. It was a holy land for cultivation. When Murong-yu gave the order, Shenzhen began to build statues of Murong-yu in these worlds. Basically, there would be a statue in the huge plaza of every city of some scale. However, in the beginning, although people looked at the statues with reverence, they couldn't become Murong-yu's believers. Naturally, they couldn't provide Murong-yu with the power of faith. However, under the preaching of Murong-yu's devout believers in Shenzhen, in addition to Murong-yu deliberately showing his might several times, finally, people began to become Murong-yu's believers. In the beginning, the believers all had some difficult problems. They'd only chosen Murong-yu because they had no other choice. In the deity realm, immortal realm, and cultivation world, with Murong-yu's strength, he didn't even need to use any strength to fulfill any of the requests of the patients. Of course, Murong-yu didn't help just anyone. At the very least, Murong-yu would help if it was reasonable. Furthermore, Murong-yu definitely wouldn't help with such atrocious acts. In the beginning, it was almost a 100% success rate. When the first believers of Murong-yu happily spread the might of Murong-yu, they naturally became Murong-yu's believers. Their gratitude to Murong-yu made their faith in Murong-yu even more devout. At this time, the power of faith began to slowly gather in Murong-yu's sculpture. Then, through the sculpture, it was transmitted to Murong-yu's body. At the same time, these people spread the word about Murong-yu everywhere. Thus, more and more people became Murong-yu's believers. At this rate, it developed. In just a few years, the majority of the people in the world had become Murong-yu's believers. The reason why not everyone? That was because some people didn't believe in him at all. Moreover, some people's requests were unreasonable. Murong-yu didn't even care about them. Thus, they naturally harbored hatred in their hearts and didn't believe in Murong-yu. Half a year later, Murong-yu sat in the Great Hall of the Immemorial World's Human Race Alliance with a smile on his face. In the past 2 months, large amounts of power of faith had surged into his body like a flood. If the power of faith that surged into Murong-yu's body during the battle against the demon sky was the size of a strand of hair, then the power of faith that had surged into Murong-yu's body had exploded into a small spring. Although the reserve wasn't much, the key was that it could grow endlessly. As long as the power of faith didn't disappear, Murong-yu's power of faith wouldn't disappear. Moreover, this was only half a year's time. In the future, even more believers would join and strengthen Murong-yu's power of faith. This was because every day, Murong-yu's power of faith would increase by a lot compared to the day before. In other words, Murong-yu's believers were growing every day. And once the entire Saint's world, God's world, Immortal's world, and Cultivation's world became Murong-yu's believers, then, no matter how strong the heavens were, they wouldn't be able to kill Murong-yu. They might even be killed by Murong-yu. Father, how's the power of faith? Murong-yu strode in from outside and looked at Murong-yu anxiously as he asked. Murong-yu nodded. It's growing quite well. At this rate, I'll be able to kill ordinary supremes even more easily. Murong-yu's face immediately lit up with excitement. Father, since it's like this, what are we waiting for? Let's just kill the other 3 supremes first. As long as they exist, it's like there are 3 incomparably huge ancient sages floating above my head. The pressure is huge. Murong-yu unhappily glared at him. What are you so anxious about? Even if the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you. Your old man hasn't even said that the pressure is huge. Murong-yu chuckled. Aren't I doing this for your own good, father? Killing one will lessen the pressure on us. Do you think the holy race and the demon race only have those two supremes? There are still many supremes outside the realm. Furthermore, Yao Tian and the others are just ordinary supremes. If we provoke their titled supremes, I'm afraid we won't even be able to escape. What's there to be afraid of? They're just relying on the fact that they've cultivated for a long time. If you're given such a long time to cultivate, don't even talk about titled supremes. Even sovereigns will be titled supremes. In my opinion, we'll just kill one of them if they come. If we can't beat them, we'll just run. Once we've cultivated and increased our strength, we'll go out and destroy them. Mu Rong chuckled as he dragged a chair over and sat down in front of Mu Rong Yu. He had an impudent look on his face. Mu Rong Yu glared at him, but he didn't say anything. On the contrary, he kind of liked this way of communicating. They were naturally father and son, but they also communicated like friends. Mu Rong Yu didn't like this kind of overly serious atmosphere between father and son. Secretly, Mu Rong Yu also felt that Mu Rong Yi's words made sense. The demon race and the holy race had at least 1,000 supremes. 1,000 wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a small number either. If all of them came together, Mu Rong Yu wouldn't be able to defend against them. However, if one of them died, there would be one less. As long as Mu Rong Yu killed a few more supremes, they would naturally be afraid of death and wouldn't dare to provoke him. Moreover, Mu Rong Yu's strength wasn't stagnant. On the contrary, his speed of improvement was faster than anyone else. His talent was extremely abnormal. Why were Hua Tai and the other two still guarding Mu Rong Yu on Demon Subduing Mountain? Were they trying to kill him? This was because Mu Rong Yu's deterrence wasn't enough. If Mu Rong Yu could kill a few more supremes, Hua Tai and the other supremes wouldn't dare to provoke Mu Rong Yu. It's time to increase our deterrence. It's best if they don't dare to come back to the holy world. Mu Rong Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light, and murderous intent surged from the depths of his eyes. Seeing Mu Rong Yu's expression, Mu Rong Yi's son revealed a smile on his face. He knew that Mu Rong Yu wanted to kill and was ready to make a move. I'm really looking forward to the vision of heaven and earth. Mu Rong Yi's gaze followed the door of the main hall and looked at the sky outside with a smile on his face. Father, I wonder if I can go with you this time. Mu Rong Yi rubbed his hands and looked at Mu Rong Yu expectantly. So this was his goal. Mu Rong Yu smiled. Of course, that's great. Mu Rong Yi immediately became excited. However, he soon realized that Mu Rong Yu was looking at him with a strange smile. Father, do you have another condition? If you can withstand a blow from me with 10% of my strength, I'll allow you to go. Plop. Mu Rong Yi staggered and immediately fell to the ground. Then, he quickly stood up, patted his butt, and strode out of the main hall. Father, just pretend that I didn't say that sentence just now. Well, just pretend that I didn't come. Before he finished speaking, Mu Rong Yi had already disappeared. Mu Rong Yi just shook his head and smiled. Then, after thinking for a while, he left the main hall. After Mu Rong Yi left the main hall, the core members of the Human Race Alliance swarmed into the main hall. In front of the main hall, there was a huge crystal screen hanging in the air like last time. Mu Rong Yi had already set off for the Demon Subduing Mountain range to prepare to kill the Supreme Beings. This time, they could also watch the live broadcast. The battle between the Supreme Beings was extremely beneficial to Zhao Jiqing and the others, so no one was left behind. Mu Rong Yi soon appeared near the Demon Subduing Mountain range. Hidden, Mu Rong Yi secretly sized up Hua Tai and the other two Supreme Beings. 2 Supreme Beings of the Sacred Clan and 1 Supreme Being of the Demon Clan. The strength of the 3 was actually on par. However, if one had to rank them, then Hua Tai's strength was the lowest among the 3, followed by the Sacred Clan expert, and then the Supreme Being of the Demon Clan. Even so, the difference in strength between the 3 was actually very small. Since I killed the Demon Clan's Supreme Being Yao Tian last time, then to make it seem fair, I'll kill a Supreme Being of the Sacred Clan today. Mu Rong Yu muttered to himself, his gaze already fixed on Hua Tai. Hua Tai, who had been sitting cross-legged on a peak of the Demon Subduing Mountain with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes when Mu Rong Yu looked at him. This was because just a moment ago, he felt a trace of danger in his heart without any warning. Could it be that he wants to kill me? Hua Tai's eyes flashed with a fierce light, looking at the sacred clan, supreme being on a peak in the distance. In the holy world, only this supreme being of the demon clan had designs on him. Hua Tai never thought that the supreme being would be anyone else, let alone that the supreme being was Murong Yu, the person they had been waiting to kill all this time. As expected of a supreme being, to be able to sense something like this. However, you still have to die today. Murong Yu sneered and took a step forward, using the army character formula, shuttling through the endless space, quickly pouncing towards Hua Tai. At this moment, Hua Tai's heart was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. Shocked, he didn't hesitate to use his fastest speed to blitz to the side. Chapter 1776. After careful discussion, Murong Yu and the others decided to build a large number of Murong Yu sculptures in the God Realm, Immortal World, and Cultivation World. These sculptures had to be exactly the same as Murong Yu's. Each sculpture contained a trace of Murong Yu's divine sense and power. In the God Realm, Immortal World, and Cultivation World, this trace of divine sense and power was enough for Murong Yu to deal with any unexpected situation. It could also secretly help his believers do things that they wanted. As for the Holy World, Murong Yu was only promoting it in the Human Race Alliance and making them his believers. However, Murong Yu didn't force them. They were free to do as they wished. After all, nothing forcibly done was sweet. Apart from the Holy World, Murong Yu didn't take a forceful attitude in the other worlds. Instead, he first developed some believers and then let these believers spread his teachings outside. This was because whether it was the God Realm, Immortal World, or Cultivation World, they were all Murong Yu's world. In these worlds, Shenzhen was the strongest force. It was a holy land for cultivation. When Murong Yu gave the order, Shenzhen began to build sculptures of Murong Yu in these worlds. Basically, there would be a sculpture in the huge square of every city of some scale. However, although people looked at the sculptures with reverence in their eyes at the beginning, they couldn't become Murong Yu's believers. Naturally, they couldn't provide Murong Yu with the power of faith. However, under the preaching of Murong Yu's devout believers in Shenzhen and Murong Yu's purposeful display of his might several times, finally, there were people who began to become Murong Yu's believers. The believers in the beginning undoubtedly had some difficult problems. They'd only chosen Murong Yu because they had no other choice. In the deity realm, Immortal Realm, and Cultivation World, with Murong Yu's strength, he didn't even need to use any strength to fulfill any of the requests of the patients. Of course, Murong Yu didn't help just anyone. At the very least, Murong Yu would help if it was reasonable. Furthermore, Murong Yu definitely wouldn't help with such atrocious acts. In the beginning, it was almost 100% successful. When the first believers of Murong Yu happily spread Murong Yu's might, they naturally became Murong Yu's believers. Their gratitude to Murong Yu made their faith in Murong Yu even more devout. At this time, the power of faith began to slowly gather in Murong Yu's sculpture. Then, through the sculpture, it was transmitted to Murong Yu's body. At the same time, these people spread the word about Murong Yu everywhere. Thus, more and more people became Murong Yu's believers. At this rate, it developed. In just a few years, the majority of the world's people had become Murong Yu's believers. The reason why not everyone? That was because some people didn't believe in him at all. Moreover, some people's requests were unreasonable. Murong Yu didn't even care about them. Thus, they naturally harbored hatred in their hearts and didn't believe in Murong Yu. Half a year later, Murong Yu sat in the Great Hall of the Immemorial World's Human Race Alliance with a smile on his face. In the past 2 months, a large amount of power of faith had surged into his body like a torrent. If the power of faith that surged into Murong Yu's body during the battle against the demon sky was the size of a strand of hair, then the power of faith that had surged into Murong Yu's body had exploded into a small spring. Although the reserve wasn't much, The key was that it could grow endlessly. As long as the power of faith didn't disappear, Murong Yu's power of faith wouldn't disappear. Moreover, this was only half a year's time. In the future, even more believers would join and strengthen Murong Yu's power of faith. This was because every day, Murong Yu's power of faith would increase by a lot compared to the day before. In other words, Murong Yu's believers were growing every day. And once the entire saints' world, God's world, immortals' world, and cultivation's world became Murong Yu's believers, then, no matter how strong the heavens were, they wouldn't be able to kill Murong Yu. They might even be killed by Murong Yu. Father, how's the power of faith? Murong Yu strode in from outside and looked at Murong Yu anxiously as he asked. Murong Yu nodded. It's growing quite well. At this rate, I'll be able to kill ordinary supremes even more easily. Murong Yi's face immediately lit up with excitement. Father, since that's the case, what are we waiting for? Let's just kill the other 3 supremes first. As long as they exist, it's like there are 3 incomparably huge ancient sages floating above my head. The pressure is as great as a mountain. Murong Yu unhappily glared at him. What are you so anxious about? Even if the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you. Your old man hasn't even said that the pressure is as great as a mountain. Murong Yu chuckled. Aren't I doing this for your own good, father? Killing one will lessen the pressure on us. Do you think the sacred race and the demon race only have those 2 supremes? There are still many supremes in the outer realm. Furthermore, Yao Tian and the others are just ordinary supremes. If we provoke their titled supremes, I'm afraid we won't even be able to escape. What's there to be afraid of? They're just relying on the fact that they've cultivated for a long time. If you were given such a long time to cultivate, don't even talk about titled supremes. Even sovereigns would be titled supremes. The way I see it, we'll just kill whoever comes. If we can't beat them, we'll run. Once we've cultivated and increased our strength, we'll go out and exterminate them. Murong Yu chuckled as he dragged a chair over and sat down in front of Murong Yu. He had an impudent look on his face. Murong Yu glared at him, but he didn't say anything. On the contrary, he kind of liked this way of communicating. They were father and son, but they also interacted like friends. Murong Yu didn't like the overly serious atmosphere between father and son. Secretly, Murong Yu also felt that Murong Yi's words made sense. There were at least 1,000 supremes in both the sacred race and the sacred race. 1,000 wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a small number either. If they came together, Murong Yu wouldn't be able to defend against them. However, if they died, there would be one less. As long as Murong Yu killed a few more supremes, they would naturally fear death and wouldn't dare to provoke him. Moreover, Murong Yu's strength wasn't stagnant. On the contrary, his strength was increasing faster than anyone else's. His talent was extremely abnormal. Why were Hua Tai and the other 2 still guarding Murong Yu on Demon Subduing Mountain? Were they trying to kill him? This was because Murong Yu's deterrence wasn't enough. If Murong Yu could kill a few more supremes, Hua Tai and the other supremes wouldn't dare to provoke Murong Yu. It's time to increase our deterrence. It's best if they don't dare to come back to the sacred world. Murong Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light, killing intent surging from the depths of his eyes. Seeing Murong Yu's expression, Murong Yi's son revealed a smile on his face. He knew that Murong Yu wanted to kill and was ready to make a move. I'm really looking forward to the vision of heaven and earth. Murong Yi's gaze followed the door of the hall to the sky outside, and a smile appeared on his face. Father, I wonder if I can go with you this time. Murong Yu rubbed his hands and looked at Murong Yu expectantly. So this was his goal. Murong Yu smiled. Of course, that's great. Murong Yu immediately became excited. However, he soon realized that Murong Yu was looking at him with a strange smile. Father, do you have another condition? If you can withstand a blow from me with 10% of my strength, I'll allow you to go. Plop. Murong Yu staggered and immediately fell to the ground. Then, he quickly stood up, patted his butt, and strode out of the hall. Father, just pretend that I didn't say that. Well, just pretend that I didn't come. Before he finished speaking, Murong Yu had already disappeared. Murong Yu just shook his head and smiled, then left the hall after thinking for a while. After Murong Yu left the hall, the core members of the Human Race Alliance swarmed into the hall. In front of the hall, there was a huge crystal screen hanging in the air like last time. Murong Yu had already set off for the demon-subduing mountain range, preparing to kill the Supreme Beings. This time, they could also watch the live broadcast. The battle between the Supreme Beings was extremely beneficial to Zhao, Jiqing, and the others, so no one was left behind. Murong Yu soon appeared near the demon-subduing mountain range. Hidden, Murong Yu secretly sized up Huatai and the other two Supreme Beings. Two Supreme Beings of the Sacred Clan, and one Supreme Being of the Demonic Clan. The three of them were actually on par with each other in terms of strength. But if one had to rank them, then Huatai's strength was the lowest among the three, followed by the Sacred Clan expert, and then the Supreme Being of the Demonic Clan. Even so, the difference in strength between the three was actually very small. I killed the Supreme Being of the Demonic Clan last time, so to make it seem fair, I'll kill a Supreme Being of the Sacred Clan today. Murong Yu muttered to himself, his gaze already fixed on Huatai. Huatai, who had been sitting cross-legged on the peak of the demon-subduing mountain with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes when Murong Yu looked at him. This was because just a moment ago, he felt a dangerous aura in his heart without any warning. Could it be that he wants to kill me? Huatai's eyes flashed with a fierce light, looking at the Supreme Being of the Sacred Clan on the peak in front of him. In the sacred world, only this Supreme Being of the Demonic Clan would have designs on him. And Huatai never thought that it would be anyone else, let alone that it would be Murong Yu, who they had been waiting to kill all this time. As expected of a Supreme Being to be able to sense something like this. But you still have to die today. Murong Yu sneered, taking a step forward, using the army character formula, shuttling through the endless space, quickly pouncing towards Huatai. At this moment, Huatai's heart was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. Shocked, he didn't hesitate to use his fastest speed to blitz to the side. Chapter 1777. As a Supreme Being, Huatai's reaction was normal. In fact, he'd already reacted before Murong Yu's attack had even arrived. His ability to sense danger was extremely powerful. However, Murong Yu wanted to kill him. Moreover, it was a sneak attack. The current Murong Yu was no longer the same person as when he had killed Yao Tian. His current strength had more than doubled compared to that time. At least in terms of the power of faith, it was incomparable. This time, Murong Yu's power of faith was enough for him to use. Hence, he added a large amount of power of faith to his attack. Since he still had a lot of power of faith, he wasn't afraid of wasting it. Swoosh! Just as Huatai's body swayed and retreated to one side, Murong Yu's soul attack, Saint's Soul Slash, which contained a large amount of power of faith, had already slashed down. Soul attack. It's Murong Yu. At this moment, Huatai finally reacted. He knew that Murong Yu's best and most insidious attack was soul attack. Hence, he immediately retracted a large amount of power to protect his soul. However, although he was a Supreme Being, Murong Yu's soul realm had reached 8 stars, which was comparable to a Supreme Being's. In addition, the power of faith was many times stronger than an ordinary Supreme Being's. When the power of faith and the power of soul realm were combined, the power was even stronger than a single power. Poof! With a dull thud, the power that Huatai had retracted in a hurry was shattered by the Saint's Soul Slash. Although Murong Yu's power of soul realm was slightly shattered, it still carried a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth as it slashed down on Huatai's soul. Chi! After a crisp sound, Huatai's soul was directly cut into 2. However, although such an injury was considered a serious injury to a Supreme Being, it wasn't fatal. Although Huatai was shocked by Murong Yu's strength, he quickly retreated to one side. Soul Storm. Murong Yu roared in his heart, and the Soul Warblade exploded in Huatai's soul. Like a violent storm, it directly strangled in all directions. Puchi! 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 Huatai didn't even have time to react before his entire soul was crushed. In the end, he only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before he fell to the ground. Rumble, the phenomenon of the world, descended once again. Endless clouds of blood and rain enveloped the entire saint's world before pouring down. Jizun was dead. Even the heavens and earth mourned for him. The whole world was shocked. When they saw the rain of blood, the demon race and holy race people in the holy world suddenly felt like their hearts were blocked. In the current holy world, only the holy race and the demon race had supremes. Now, that a supreme being had fallen, didn't that mean it was a supreme being from the holy race or the demon race? However, who else in the holy world could kill a supreme being? Could it be that Murongyu? Murongyu killed another supreme being? While the monster race and saint race experts were bewildered and guessing, the humans of the primeval world roared with joy and excitement. This was because Murongyu was 100% sure that he could kill Huatai this time. Therefore, apart from the core upper echelons who could see the scene of him killing a supreme being, everyone in the immemorial world could see it. Originally, the Human Race Alliance didn't have any doubts about Murongyu's strength and naturally believed that he was the one who killed the supreme being. However, hearing, believing, and seeing it with their own eyes were two completely different things. At this time, when they saw Murongyu kill a supreme being with their own eyes, how could they not be excited? In an instant, many people became Murongyu's believers and provided Murongyu with an endless supply of faith. Shua, Murongyu reached out and grabbed Huatai's corpse. At this time, the remaining two supreme beings from the holy race and demon race reacted. Each and every one of them roared as they unleashed their strongest attacks at Murongyu. Murongyu only sneered. He grabbed Huatai's corpse with one hand and stepped into the void with the other. The two supreme beings only saw Murongyu's figure flash and then disappear. He didn't even leave behind his aura, making it impossible for them to track him. The two of you listen up. I'll give you 3 days to return to the holy world. Otherwise, I'll kill one of you 3 days later. As for which one? Murongyu's sneering voice came from the depths of the void, but he had already disappeared. The two supreme beings were incomparably furious. They roared and attacked the surrounding void and earth. Even when the void and earth were shattered, they still couldn't find any trace of Murongyu. Kill one of us 3 days later? After a long while, the two supreme beings finally vented their anger and looked at each other. When they killed Yao Tian, Murongyu's strength was only SOSO. At that time, although Murongyu was a little threatening to them, they didn't take him seriously. However, in just a few decades, Murongyu's strength had skyrocketed once again. He quickly killed Huatai as soon as he attacked. In fact, Huatai didn't even have time to react, let alone fight back. The two supreme beings were confident that they were stronger than Huatai. However, they were only slightly stronger. There was a limit to their strength. In other words, they weren't Murongyu's match at all. If Murongyu really wanted to kill them, they would only be killed if they didn't escape. However, would they be scared off by Murongyu's words? If they fled back to the outer realm because of Murongyu's words, they would definitely be laughed to death by the outer realm supremes. They couldn't afford to lose that face. However, what if Murongyu really came to kill them? What could they use to block him? The two supreme beings looked at each other, and the supreme being of the holy race said in a deep voice, Murongyu is only a level 5 chaotic ancestor sage. Although he killed Yao Tian and Huatai, he must have used some heaven-defying treasure. I don't believe that he has an even stronger treasure. A cold, killing intent flashed across the supreme being's eyes. He nodded and said, "That's right. If he dares to come, I'll kill him." The two of them looked at each other again. Then, they both flew into the distance at the same time. Although they said that, they were actually very nervous. After the supreme being of the demon race returned to Mount Heavenly Monster, he began to set up all sorts of formations around Mount Heavenly Monster. The supreme beings of the holy race did the same. Although they said that they weren't afraid, they were extremely afraid. However, they didn't know that these formations and restrictions were useless against Murongyu. They couldn't stop Morong Yu's footsteps at all. In less than a day, Morong Yu ordered the three supreme beings to return to the outside world within 3 days. The news that Morong Yu was going to kill them spread throughout the entire holy world. The moment the news spread, the entire holy world was shaken. The supreme beings of the holy race and demon race wanted to curse Morong Yu for overestimating his own strength and for being arrogant. However, none of them dared to curse him. This was because Morong Yu had already killed 2 supreme beings in a row. With his strength, he was qualified to say such words. Morong Yu had a very high chance of killing the 2 supreme beings. For a moment, the supreme beings of the holy race and demon race were very nervous. They were all worried for their supreme beings. In reality, they weren't really worried for the 2 supreme beings. They were worried that the 2 supreme beings would be killed by Morong Yu. Then, the holy race and demon race would be destroyed. The holy world would be unified, and Morong Yu would become the overlord of the holy world. Even if the holy race and demon race didn't perish, they would become Morong Yu's slaves and would never be able to rise again. As for the life and death of the supreme beings, they really didn't care. After all, the gap between them and the supreme beings was just too big. There was no direct relationship at all. They wouldn't be sad if they died. On the other side, Morong Yu had already returned to the immemorial world. After killing 2 supreme beings in a row, Morong Yu's status in the hearts of the human race rose again. He was placed in the highest position. Countless people became his believers, and more faith power quickly surged into his body, increasing the faith power in his body. In the Great Hall of the Human Race Alliance, apart from Morong Yu, many of the core upper echelons of the Human Race Alliance were gathered in the Great Hall. These people were all Morong Yu's most loyal subordinates. If they weren't his most loyal subordinates, they wouldn't have the right to be here. This was because Morong Yu had an important announcement to make today. After sweeping a glance at the crowd, Morong Yu waved his hand. Whoosh, whoosh. 2 figures appeared out of thin air before everyone's eyes. These are the corpses of the demon sky, supreme being, and Huatai, supreme being. An expert on the saint rankings couldn't help but exclaim when he saw the 2 figures clearly. Holy Master, what are you doing? Everyone was stunned at first. Then, they all looked at Morong Yu with excitement. They could vaguely guess Morong Yu's intentions. Morong Yu nodded. Perhaps you've all guessed my intentions. That's right, although these 2 supreme beings aren't from the human race, they're still supreme beings. After all, they're supreme beings. Moreover, I've only destroyed their souls. Their bodies aren't damaged at all. If we can refine or control their bodies, we'll have 2 more supreme beings. Hiss, although everyone could vaguely guess Morong Yu's intentions, they still couldn't help but gasp when they heard Morong Yu say it with their own ears. These were supreme beings. If he could control this body and refine it into his own, then he would become a supreme being out of nowhere. Moreover, everyone present could become supreme beings. For a moment, many people in the Great Hall were excited as they looked at the corpses of the demon sky, supreme being, and Huatai, supreme being. Everyone's gaze was undisguised. However, there were only 2 supreme being corpses. Only 2 of them had the possibility of becoming supreme beings. Chapter 1778. Would they have a share in this opportunity? Although everyone coveted the corpses of the 2 supreme beings, they all knew that. Although they were all standing here, and although they had a chance, the final decision was still in Morong Yu's hands. Moreover, even if they obtained the corpses, without Morong Yu's help, they wouldn't be able to refine the corpses and become supreme beings themselves. Without a soul, you won't have any memories. Even if you refine the corpses of Yao Tian and Huatai, you'll only become supreme beings physically. Morong Yu looked at everyone and continued. However, as long as you're a supreme being, your physical body will contain some memories and even your cultivation experience. As long as you refine the corpses, you'll be able to comprehend these experiences. These experiences will allow you to become a true, supreme being in a short period of time. Hearing Morong Yu's words, Everyone's eyes burned with passion. They needed time to comprehend. They lacked many things, but what they didn't lack the most was time. That was because Hichu Luo Shu could accelerate time. In the He-Tu and the Book of the Luo, who knew how many epochs had passed since a single day in the saint's world. Seeing everyone's burning eyes, Murong Yu smiled and continued. However, although these two corpses can allow you to become supreme being experts, your physical body will be limited by your physical body. However, due to the limitations of your physical bodies, the most you can achieve in your lifetime is the same as Huatai and Yao Tian. As for me, I'll become a primal chaos controller in the future. I'll become stronger and stronger, and so will your strength. The best examples are Zhang Ao, Duan Muqing, and the rest of you. Everyone immediately looked at Zhang Ao, Duan Muqing, and the others who had ascended from the cultivation world and the immortal world. The weakest among them was a primal chaos ancestor sage, while the strongest was an expert on the saint rankings. One had to know that with Zhang Ao, Duan Muqing, and the others' talents, they wouldn't be able to reach the primal chaos ancestor sage level. At most, they could only survive in the immortal world. Moreover, they probably wouldn't even be able to reach the immortal emperor realm. After all, their talents weren't that great. However, they had been following Murong Yu all this time, and their strength had skyrocketed. Although his talent was ordinary, his cultivation speed was much faster than some of the so-called top geniuses of the holy world. And once Murong Yu became the chaos controller, their future achievements would definitely not be bad. On the other hand, Huatai and Yao Tian's achievements were only ordinary. Therefore, after listening to Murong Yu's words, everyone fell silent. The fervor in his eyes had also lessened by a lot. After a while, people began to talk. First, those with better aptitudes. People like Murong, Xian, and Fantong immediately rejected the idea. After all, with their own aptitudes and their relationship with Murong Yu, it was entirely possible for them to become supreme beings in the future. Of course, the premise was that Murong Yu hadn't died. Otherwise, if Murong Yu were to fall, everything would be for naught. In the end, only a few people who felt that their aptitudes were inferior still looked at Yao Tian and Huatai's corpses with fervor. Because there were only two supreme beings' corpses, Murong Yu only chose two of them. Sun Feiyang, Qi Junjie. Before entering the Hichu Luoshu world, Murong Yu said to the disheartened sages, "The rest of you don't need to be discouraged. There are more than 1,000 supreme beings in the holy world. You will definitely have a chance." The sage's eyes immediately lit up. In the Hichu Luoshu world, Murong Yu had already accelerated time to the limit. Only an instant had passed in the holy world, but many years had passed in the Hichu Luoshu world. Sun Feiyang, your soul is more compatible with Yao Tian's body. Why don't you refine and fuse with Yao Tian's body? Murong Yu glanced at Sun Feiyang, then asked him to calm down and prepare to refine Yao Tian's body. During this process, Murong Yu used his life force to rapidly cleanse Yao Tian's body. After all, even though Yao Tian's body was that of a supreme being, it wasn't perfect. There were many hidden injuries and hidden injuries. Furthermore, as he cleansed Yao Tian's body, he also removed some of Yao Tian's remaining energy, consciousness, and soul. He wanted to cleanse Yao Tian's body even more before Sun Feiyang refined it. As for Qi Junjie, he didn't need Murong Yu to heal him. He also began to calm down. After a few days, Sun Feiyang's essence, energy, and soul had already been raised to the limit. At this moment, Murong Yu finally made his move. He directly grabbed Sun Feiyang's soul from his soul space. The next step is extremely important. No matter what, you have to hold on. Otherwise, your soul will be shattered into pieces. Even I won't be able to help you. Murong Yu said in a deep voice. Sun Feiyang's soul nodded slightly. In the next moment, Murong Yu sent Sun Feiyang's soul into Yao Tian's soul space. As soon as it started, Sun Feiyang couldn't help but scream. To Murong Yu, Yao Tian's body couldn't cause him any pressure at all. However, Sun Feiyang was only a rank 9 chaotic ancestor sage. He wasn't even an expert on the sage rankings. Even though Yao Tian was already dead, the pressure emanating from his body was still enough to crush him to death. Furthermore, Sun Feiyong was only in his soul form. Entering Yao Tian's soul space? Immediately, an incomparably terrifying pressure spread out from all directions, directly acting on Sun Feiyong's soul. Sun Feiyong's soul was protected by Murongyu. However, just the aftermath of the pressure was enough to crush his soul, turning it into dust. The intense pain almost caused Sun Feiyong's soul to faint. However, Sun Feiyong gritted his teeth and endured it. Other than letting out a scream, because he was caught off guard at the beginning, he didn't let out another scream. Seeing Sun Feiyong's performance, Murongyu nodded slightly and revealed a satisfied look. With Murongyu's strength, he could prevent Sun Feiyong from feeling the pressure from Yao Tian's body. However, Murongyu didn't want to do that. Yes, Murongyu purposely allowed Sun Feiyong to feel it. Furthermore, as time passed, Sun Feiyong's soul felt more and more pressure. However, Sun Feiyong gritted his teeth and endured it. He knew that there was still a huge gap between his soul and Yao Tian's soul. This was just a small matter. If he couldn't even withstand the pressure, how could he control Yao Tian's body? Not to mention refining and merging with Yao Tian's body. Boom, boom. As the pressure increased, Sun Feiyong felt more and more pain. In fact, Sun Feiyong's soul was starting to be injured. However, Murongyu's life force was always on standby. The moment Sun Feiyong's soul was injured, he would immediately heal it. Holy Master, I can still withstand it. Increase the pressure. Sun Feiyong transmitted his voice to Murongyu. Murongyu nodded and removed some of the protection. Time passed day by day. Sun Feiyong continued to endure the pressure from Yao Tian's body. At the beginning, he was in extreme pain, but he slowly got used to it. It wasn't that he was used to the pain. Instead, his soul was getting stronger and stronger. Furthermore, his soul was slowly fusing with Yao Tian's body. Holy Master, I can still do it. Sun Feiyong didn't know how many times he had said it. Every time he said it, he would receive an even stronger pressure. But this time, there was no more pressure after he finished speaking. Sun Feiyong was stunned. Then, he became ecstatic. The fact that there was no more pressure meant that he could withstand Yao Tian's pressure. Furthermore, the compatibility between them had reached the maximum. Now, he should be preparing to refine Yao Tian's body so that his soul could perfectly fuse with Yao Tian's body. As expected, Sun Feiyong, calm your mind. From now on, I will help you refine Yao Tian's body. As he spoke, a terrifying force enveloped Yao Tian's body and Sun Feiyong's soul. With Murongyu's help, Sun Feiyong started to refine Yao Tian's body. However, once he was on the right track, Murongyu gave up on helping him. After all, it would take a long time to completely refine and fuse with Yao Tian's body, even with his help. If it was any other time, Murongyu wouldn't have minded. However, there was another person he needed to help now. Qi Junjie. He wanted to refine and fuse with Huatai's body. He had the same experience as Sun Feiyong. With Murongyu's help, he was able to refine Huatai's body without any mishaps. At this moment, only a day had passed in the Holy World. However, if the two of them wanted to become paragons, just fusing with their bodies wasn't enough. They needed to comprehend more. After all, even though they had the bodies of paragons, they didn't have the corresponding strength, techniques, or battle skills. It was useless. Since there was still a lot of time, Murongyu decided to stay in Hichu Luo Shu. He split his divine perception to observe Sun Feiyong and Qi Junjie. As for him, he also began to cultivate. He pondered over the power of faith. He felt that the power of faith wasn't as simple as it seemed. Apart from being able to attack, it definitely had other abilities. It was just that he hadn't discovered them yet. However, 2 days had passed in the Holy World, and Murongyu hadn't discovered any other abilities of the power of faith. Instead, his other techniques and battle skills had improved by quite a bit. The power of his battle skills had increased by quite a bit, and he had become more familiar with the use of power. After a long period of cultivation, Sun Feiyong and Qi Junjie had finally successfully fused with Yao Tian's and Hua Tai's bodies. Although they couldn't become true paragons yet, their strength wasn't weak. They were definitely invincible below paragons. Of course, this was only if Murong Yu wasn't involved. Once they comprehended the power of faith, they would quickly possess the strength of a paragon's. Chapter 1779. 3 days had passed. Today was the 4th day, and Murong Yu just so happened to leave the Hichu Luo Shu. After leaving Hichu Luo Shu, Murong Yu listened to the Human Race Alliance's report and left Hichu Luo Shu. The two supremes of the Holy Race and Demon Race didn't leave. They ignored Murong Yu's warning. When Murong Yu found out that they were still in the Holy World, he couldn't help but laugh coldly. Then, a smile appeared on his face. It was great that those two idiotic supremes hadn't left the Holy World. It would give Murong Yu a chance to establish his dominance. At the same time, once Murong Yu killed them, he could create 2 more supremes for the Human Race Alliance. In fact, Murong Yu was a little worried that the 2 supremes would be scared away. Murong Yu didn't use the Hichu Luo Shu to teleport over. Instead, he used the army character formula to freely travel through space and time. In fact, Murong Yu's current speed was already extremely terrifying. Previously, his speed was already on par with Yao Tian and the others. Now that he had mixed in some of the power of faith, his speed increased exponentially. At this moment, even if Yao Tian and Hua Tai were revived, they would still be far behind Murong Yu's speed. I'll kill the supremes of the demon race first. After killing them, the demon race will only exist in name, Murong Yu muttered to himself. He had already turned around and flew towards the heavenly demon mountain. On the demons subduing mountain, hundreds of millions of demon race experts looked outside anxiously, as if they were waiting for something. This was the 4th day. They were all guessing whether Murong Yu had really come to kill the supremes of the demon race or the holy race. At this moment, the supremes of the demon race were alone in the celestial palace. Their faces were extremely gloomy. However, if someone were to look carefully here, they would be able to see that under this supreme martial artist's gloomy face, there would occasionally be a hint of uneasiness and nervousness. In fact, there was even a hint of fear in the depths of his eyes. Yes, it was fear. Murong Yu was too powerful, and he admitted that he was no match for Murong Yu. But because of this, his aura was far inferior to Murong Yu's. He had already lost before the fight even started. If things continued like this, he would definitely not be a match for Murong Yu. Furthermore, what made this supreme being depressed was that he had already reported the matter of the Holy World, especially the matter of Murong Yu, to his superiors. It was actually a cry for help. But now, it was already the 4th day, and no supreme being from the outer realm had returned. The supreme being couldn't help but feel terrified. Moreover, he hadn't received any news that he could return to the outer realm. If he ran back like this, even though he wouldn't be sentenced to death, he would definitely be punished. In the future, he would definitely be looked down upon by the other supremes. It wasn't just the sovereign of the monster race who felt this way. Even the sacred race felt the same way. Whoosh! Murong Yu took a step forward, smashing through the void and appearing in the sky above monster, subduing mountain. Murong Yu is here. When they saw Murong Yu, many people on monster subduing mountain couldn't help but feel their hearts tighten. Some people were so frightened that their bodies went limp, and with a plop, they fell to the ground. Murong Yu had only revealed his figure, and hadn't even released his aura. One could only imagine how terrifying Murong Yu's deterrence was now. He's here. The supreme being of the monster race in Celestial Palace trembled violently. He raised his head to look at the sky outside, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. But very quickly, his expression became resolute, and at the same time, he strode outside. This was a disaster that couldn't be avoided. The supreme being of the monster race knew that this was unavoidable, so he could only brace himself and go out. However, when he went outside, his expression became cold, and he pretended to be aloof and disdainful. Murong, very well. You've really come here to die. The supreme being of the monster race rose into the air and finally stood in front of Murong, laughing coldly as he looked at Murong. When he heard the supreme being of the monster race's words, Murong almost laughed out loud. Can you not be such a hypocrite? You're obviously scared to death, but you're still so stubborn? Aren't you tired of pretending? Pooh! The supreme being of the monster race almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Even if Murong knew, he shouldn't have said it out loud, right? Wasn't he trying to embarrass the supreme being of the monster race? However, the supreme being of the monster race would never admit that he was afraid. Thus, he took a step forward and said indifferently, Murong, cut the crap. Even though you were able to kill Yao Tian and Hua Tai, I'm not as useless as those two. Since you're here today, you can forget about leaving. Murong smiled at the supreme being of the monster race. Since I've taken your head, I naturally have to. However, before Murong could finish his sentence, his expression changed drastically. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared from where he was standing. Just as he disappeared, an incomparably terrifying power tore through the void from Mount Heavenly Monster below and shot up. In the blink of an eye, the space where Murong was standing had been annihilated. At the same time, the supreme being of the monster race took action as well. He immediately sealed the surrounding void, and a terrifying energy swept out in all directions like a tidal wave. Is he dead? When they saw that Murong had disappeared, the monster race members on Mount Tianyao couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. They all thought that they had killed Murong. Only the supreme being of the monster race didn't think so. However, he couldn't see where Murong was hiding. Whoosh! The supreme being of the monster race was certain that Murong hadn't been killed. Thus, he rushed up to Mount Tianyao. Rumble! After the supreme being of the monster race returned to Mount Tianyao, the monster race activated various formations and restrictions, enveloping the entire Mount Tianyao. My lord, is Murong still not dead? A monster race expert on the Saint rankings walked up to the supreme being of the monster race and asked in confusion. The supreme being of the monster race looked around with a gloomy expression. He didn't even look at the expert on the Saint rankings. At the same time, his divine consciousness covered an area of hundreds of millions of miles, constantly searching for Murong. However, he still couldn't find anything. It was as if Murong had really been blasted into smithereens. Was Murong really dead? That was impossible. Is this the power of the supreme being of the monster race? Do you think you can kill me with these little tricks of yours? You're too naive. A disdainful sneer came from the sky. Everyone was shocked and looked in the direction of the voice. They just happened to see Murong walking down from the sky with a disdainful smile on his face. His speed was neither fast nor slow, but with a single step, he crossed the boundless void and appeared above the formation on Mount Tianyao. Then, Murong took another step forward. Under everyone's shocked gazes, Murong directly passed through thousands of formations and entered Mount Tianyao. However, the countless formations and restrictions that the supreme being of the monster race had painstakingly set up didn't even ripple. These formations and restrictions are actually useless against him. The monster race experts were in disarray. They naturally didn't doubt the power of the formations and restrictions set up by the supreme being of the monster race. It could only be said that Murong was simply too monstrous, too monstrous. Kushan, do you want to commit suicide, or do you want me to do it myself? Today, you will die without a doubt. Oh, of course, if you're willing to submit to me, I can spare your life. Murong opened his eyes and didn't look at the monster race experts. He only looked at the supreme being of the monster race, Kushan, and asked indifferently. Kushan was furious. Murong was indeed powerful, but wasn't he too arrogant? He was a supreme being, but in the eyes of Murong, who wasn't even a supreme being, he couldn't even compare to an ant. You're courting death, Kushan roared. In an instant, he had already raised his strength to the limit and punched towards Murong with incomparable speed. A cold, murderous intent flashed in Murong Yu's eyes. He took a step forward and roared at the same time, "Saint's Soul Slash." In the next moment, the Saint's Soul Slash, which contained a large amount of faith power, ruthlessly slashed towards Kushan. Pucci, in the void, the power of the two sides collided fiercely. The sound of cloth being torn apart could be heard continuously. Under the horrified gazes of the monster race experts, their supreme being of the Mountain Crusher's power couldn't withstand a single blow and was directly shattered. Following that, supreme being of the Mountain Crusher's fist was also directly smashed into a pile of dust. On the other hand, Murong Yu's Saint's Soul Slash only consumed a small portion of his strength. It didn't stop at all and continued to advance. Kushan was shocked. His body swayed, and he retreated rapidly. However, how could his speed compare to the speed of the soul attack? In an instant, the Saint's Soul Slash had already rushed into Kushan's soul space and directly shattered the power that filled Kushan's soul space. Then, it directly slashed on Kushan's soul. Kushan only had time to let out an extremely tragic scream. Then, his body fell straight to the ground. At this moment, his soul had been completely shattered by Murong Yu. Rumble. Just as Kushan let out a miserable scream, blood clouds and blood rain appeared between heaven and earth again. When a supreme being fell, the heavens and earth mourned for it. This was the third supreme being to fall in the holy world within 100 years. And all three of them had died at the hands of the same person. In the depths of the sacred race, the supreme being of the sacred race suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw the heavens and earth phenomenon, his body couldn't help but tremble. Was Kushan killed? 3 supreme beings fell in 100 years. Countless epochs have passed without a single supreme being falling. 3 of them have died just like that. Is the holy world's sky going to change? Am I going to be the 4th? The supreme being of the sacred race looked at the blood clouds and blood rain that filled the sky, his eyes filled with horror. The supreme being is dead. On the heavenly monster mountain, many saints of the demon race watched as Murong Yu calmly stored supreme being of the mountain crusher's corpse into the Hichu Luo Shu. No one dared to make a sound, not even a single breath. Chapter 1780. At this moment, all the demons on Mount Tianyao were silent. They all looked at Murong Yu with pale faces, not saying a word. What else could they do? Even the Supremes had been easily killed by Murong Yu, let alone them. Now, it was Murong Yu who decided whether they lived or died. After collecting Duishan's corpse, Murong Yu did not leave immediately. Instead, he stood where he was and looked indifferently at the pale demons on Mount Tianyao. Do you choose to submit or die? Murong Yu did not waste time with them. He went straight to the point. In reality, these people did not pose any threat to him. However, there were hundreds of millions of them, and hundreds of them were on the saint rankings. As the remnants of the Yao clan, they naturally held a deep grudge against Murong Yu and the human clan. If Murong Yu had let them go, they might not have posed any threat to Murong Yu. However, they would be a huge threat to the rest of the human race. It was like a rat's droppings spoiling a pot of porridge. Therefore, Murong Yu would never let them go. They only had 2 options, submit or die. Even if they submitted, Murong Yu would seal their powers. That way, they would not be a threat to the human race. We are willing to submit. In reality, after seeing Murong Yu easily kill Supreme's Duishan, these demons had already submitted to Murong Yu. After all, this was the saint's world. This was a world where the strong were worshipped. This was a world where the strong were respected. Therefore, before Murong Yu finished speaking, most of the demons on Mount Tianyao had already knelt down and expressed their willingness to submit. Of course, there were some who were unwilling to submit. However, in the end, they had no choice but to submit. If they submitted to Murong Yu, they could live. However, if they did not submit, they would die. As the saying went, a bad life was better than a good death. Thus, in the end, everyone had submitted to him. At this point, there were no more demons in the saint's world. Although most of the demons were not killed, their powers were sealed. However, their powers were sealed, and they became slaves of the human race. Of course, they were slaves on the surface. However, the humans didn't mistreat them. They just let them live in one area. The humans didn't interfere with what they did. Of course, necessary supervision was still necessary. But that was it. Although they had lost their strength, there was nothing to compete for. It was better for some people. 3 days. If Balian is still in the saint's world after 3 days, he can bring his head to me. Otherwise, I will personally go and take his head. After exterminating the demon race, Murong-Yu once again sent out a message. Balian, the sovereign of the demon race. After hearing Murong-Yu's words, Balian was completely shocked. Murong-Yu's strength was too terrifying. If killing Yao Tian was a matter of luck, then killing Hua Tai was a matter of strength. Perhaps some people would say that Murong-Yu was just lucky to be able to kill Hua Tai. But what about Duanshan's death? The deaths of the 3 sovereigns were enough to prove Murong-Yu's strength, especially Duanshan's strength, which was slightly stronger than Balian's. Thus, when Murong-Yu said those words, Balian was naturally alarmed. Returned to the outer realm, in the depths of the saint's world, in a certain hall, Sovereign Balian was thinking uneasily. This time, he had returned to the saint's world with a mission. That was to kill Murong-Yu and obtain his physical body. Moreover, he had volunteered for this mission. It was a military order. If he escaped back to the outer realm, the saint's world might not kill him. However, they definitely wouldn't tolerate him. In the future, even if he stayed in the outer realm, he would be the most useless one. Bastard, Balian suddenly cursed. This was because he had already reported Murong-Yu's news a few days ago. Furthermore, he had strongly requested for the outer realm to send a stronger sovereign to kill Murong-Yu. Balian estimated that although Murong-Yu's strength was strong, it was about the same as a 1-star sovereign like him. Moreover, it was only the strength of his soul. If Murong-Yu wasn't a soul sage, he could kill Murong-Yu millions of times in an instant. However, Murong-Yu's strength was limited. As long as a 2-star sovereign or a higher-level sovereign came down, Murong-Yu wouldn't be able to jump around so happily. However, after a few days, no stronger sovereign came down. On the contrary, another supreme being had been killed by Murong-Yu. This raised Murong-Yu's prestige in the saint's world. In the past, the saint's world hated and rejected Murong-Yu. However, in the current saint's world, many saint's world experts even used a tone of worship when they talked about Murong-Yu. This was a world where the strong preyed on the weak, where the strong were respected. Whoever was strong, there would be people who would submit to them, especially when Murong-Yu was only a 5th-order primal chaos ancestor sage. He was able to kill a sovereign. This made the saints' experts worship him even more. 3 days later, Murong-Yu will kill Sovereign Balian. I wonder if Sovereign Balian dares to accept the challenge? Is he a match for Murong-Yu? Sovereign Balian? Someone's face revealed a look of disdain. Before Murong-Yu killed a sovereign, everyone was envious and worshipful when they mentioned the word sovereign. In their limited knowledge, sovereigns were undoubtedly strong, almost invincible existences. However, Murong-Yu's appearance overturned their knowledge. He killed 3 sovereigns in a row, and the 3 sovereigns' weak performance caused many saints to have an illusion. They felt that sovereigns were not as strong as they imagined. When Murong-Yu made the announcement, the 100 refined sovereign had already disappeared. However, we don't know if he's in seclusion or escaped. Some of the experts on the saint rankings who were in contact with 100 refined sovereigns said, helplessly, Sovereign Balian couldn't have really run away, right? Soon, the saint world experts were speechless, because they really found that Sovereign Balian had run away without fighting. In the entire saint's world, no one knew where he was. Regarding this, the saint's world experts felt ashamed. Sovereign Balian? Murong-Yu had already run away before he even made a move. How could they endure this? Therefore, later on, when they talked about Sovereign Balian, their faces were full of disdain. This kind of behavior was simply too shameless. At the same time, the outer realm world was shaken. 3 sovereigns were killed in a row, and the murderer was the same person. This infuriated the supremes of the sacred race and the demon race. This was especially true for the Yao clan. They had lost 2 supreme beings, and their losses were extremely heavy. Many sovereigns wanted to return to the saints' world to kill Murong Yu. However, no one returned. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but they didn't dare to. Originally, the saints and demons secretly sent experts back to the saints' world. Even the sovereigns couldn't find out. However, the 3 consecutive heaven and earth anomalies couldn't escape the eyes of the sovereigns. It was said that because of this, the heavens were furious. The loss of sovereigns didn't benefit the heavens at all. After all, if he wanted to break through the reincarnation cycle, he still needed the help of these sovereigns. And with one less person, his chances of successfully breaking through the reincarnation cycle would be reduced. How could he not be angry? Moreover, some people analyzed that the heavens must have been paying attention to Murong Yu. They even guessed that Murong Yu's physical body had already been reserved by the heavens. As long as Murong Yu reached the sovereign realm, the heavens would seize his body. But the saints and demons actually dared to attack Murong Yu. Wasn't this just courting death? Although the heavens didn't make any moves, the sovereigns of the saints and demons didn't dare to make any moves. Otherwise, if they angered the sovereigns, they would be killed with a slap. However, just because they didn't make any moves, it didn't mean that they didn't want to deal with Murong Yu. It was just a matter of turning from the light to the dark. Rumble. Just as the saints were mocking the 100 refined sovereign for running away without a fight. Just as the sovereigns of the saints and demons didn't dare to make any moves because of the heavens, another heaven and earth anomaly appeared. Moreover, the heaven and earth anomaly this time was even more intense than the blood clouds and blood rain that appeared when Yao Tian and the others died. This was because the heaven and earth anomaly could even be seen in the outer realm. An inaudible sound suddenly exploded in the entire saints' world. At this moment, the entire saints' world trembled. At the same time, rays of dazzling 5-colored holy light suddenly descended from the sky. 5-colored clouds covered the entire saints' world and even the outer realm sky. In an instant, the entire saints' world became a world of 5-colored holy light. This is the heaven and earth anomaly that appears when someone breaks through to the supremacy realm. The saints of the saints' world were still in a daze, but the sovereigns in the outer realm were stunned. Sovereigns were already peak experts in the saints' world. The moment they died, the heavens and earth would mourn for them, and blood clouds and blood rain would fall. And once someone became a supremacy, the heavens and earth would also send 5-colored holy light and clouds to congratulate them. As long as one was a supreme being, they would have experienced this scene. However, it had already been many eras since anyone had become a supremacy. Could it be that Murong Yu has broken through to the supremacy realm? In the saints' world, many people began to discuss. Every one of them was extremely curious, just who had broken through to the supremacy realm. However, before their guesses could come to a conclusion, less than a day after the heaven and earth anomaly disappeared, the saints' world shook violently once again. 5-colored holy light and 5-colored clouds appeared once again. Another person has broken through to the supremacy realm. The sovereigns in the outer realm were stunned. In 3 days, 2 people had broken through to the supremacy realm. This was a supremacy, not an ordinary saint or great saint. How could it be so easy to break through? Could it be that the supremacy realm was so worthless now? The sovereigns in the outer realm wanted to know who had broken through, but they had no way of returning to the saints' world to find out. As for their divine senses, they were unable to return to the saints' world. At this moment, the human race alliance was in a state of jubilation. It was nothing much, just that the human race had 2 more supremacies. Supremacy Sun Feiyang. Supremacy Qi Junjie. Chapter 1781. Supremes were split into 9 levels. from 1-star Supremes to 9-star Supremes. Among them, 1-star Supremes were the weakest, while 9-star Supremes were the strongest. As for Yao Tian and Hua Tai, there were only 1-star Supremes at their peak. In other words, Sun Feiyong and Qi Junjie would only be 1-star Supremes at most. They would not be able to become 2-star Supremes. However, Sun Feiyong and Qi Junjie were already very satisfied with what they had achieved. After all, with their talent, they would not be able to become Supremes even if the lifespan of the Holy World was exhausted. Hence, they were very grateful to Murongyu. Even though they had become Supremes, they did not become complacent or even look down on others just because they had become stronger. On the contrary, they were even more grateful than before. They were grateful to Murongyu. Although Sun Feiyong and Qi Junjie had become Supremes, they still had not reached Yao Tian and Hua Tai's peak. Becoming Supremes only meant that they had completely fused with Yao Tian and Hua Tai's bodies. If they wanted to advance further, they would need to continue cultivating and comprehending. Thus, they continued to speed up their cultivation in the He Tu and Luo tomes. At this time, Murongyu began to create the third Supremes of the Human Race Alliance. Because Duanshan was a man, Murongyu also chose a man this time. In fact, even if Murongyu wanted a woman to fuse with Duanshan, no woman would be willing to do so. After all, Duanshan's original body was a mountain. It was extremely ugly. However, all women loved beauty, and no one was willing to become an ugly mountain. Even if they would not show their original bodies, no one would choose to do so. The person that Murongyu chose was one of his trusted aides, LV Feiyue. Because of Sun Feiyong and Qi Junjie, Murongyu already had enough experience. Hence, there were no problems at all. LV Feiyue began to fuse with Duanshan's body. He believed that after 3 days in the Holy World, the Human Race Alliance would have another Supremes. In that case, the Human Race Alliance would have 4 Supremes. He could directly sweep through the entire Saints' world and be invincible in the Saints' world. In the 3 days of the Holy World, countless epochs had already passed in the Hichu, Luoshu world. At this moment, Sun Feiyong and Qi Junjie had already left the Hichu, Luoshu world and appeared in the Saints' world. They had already stabilized the sacred world and possessed the most basic abilities of the sacred world. However, he was still unable to reach Yao Tian and Hua Tai's peak condition. Why? After all, Yao Tian and Hua Tai had spent countless eras to reach that level. Although they could directly comprehend it, they still couldn't completely comprehend it in a short period of time. Moreover, cultivation was not something that could be achieved by just meditating. At this time, LV Feiyue's fusion with Duanshan's corporeal body had reached a critical juncture. In less than 1 or 2 days, he would be able to complete the fusion. At that time, the human clan would have another supreme being. However, at this time, it had been 3 days since Murongyu killed Duanshan, and now it was the 4th day. 3 days ago, after Murongyu killed Duanshan, he spread the word that he would kill Bai Lian 3 days later. Now is the time. Murongyu's words carried enormous weight, and the entire Saints' world attention was on him. He didn't want to break his promise. However, when Murongyu was about to leave the Human Clan Alliance, he couldn't help but laugh, because he heard that Bai Lian had fled in fright. However, Murongyu didn't know if Bai Lian had fled back to the outer realm or was hiding somewhere in the Saints' world. However, Murongyu still proudly appeared where Bai Lian had been. He couldn't help but sneer under the gazes of countless sacred races' saints. Bai Lian is the shame of our sacred race. At this moment, an incomparably sorrowful voice suddenly rang out from the sacred race. Immediately after, the others agreed with him. Seeing the agitated sacred race members, Murongyu was stunned. These people were clearly leaning towards Murongyu. What was going on? What Murongyu didn't know was that ever since he consecutively killed Supreme Being experts, his prestige in the Saints' world had reached an extremely high point. Even if he wasn't on good terms with the sacred race, the sacred race members didn't resist him. If it weren't for the fact that they were sworn enemies, the sacred race members would have cheered when they saw Murongyu. After a little investigation, Murongyu didn't find any traces of Bai Lian. In the end, Yu didn't personally search for him. After all, with his tracking ability, finding Bai Lian wasn't a problem at all. He only needed to follow the aura left behind by Bai Lian to find him. However, the Saint's world was so big. It would take an extremely long time to find a supreme being. Yu couldn't be bothered to waste time. There were many things waiting for him to do. The first thing to do was to subdue the sacred race and unify the Saint's world. However, what surprised Yu was that wherever the human army passed, the small races within the sacred race didn't choose to resist at all. Instead, they directly chose to submit. In the end, Yu finally understood why the sacred race, who had always been arrogant and thought that humans were just ants, directly chose to submit. Yu consecutively killed Supreme Being experts. He was invincible. This battle record received the respect and worship of many people in the Saint's world, where the strong preyed on the weak and the fist was the truth. This kind of respect and worship surpassed racial hatred and reached another level. Moreover, after Bai Lian escaped, the angel race and fiend race announced to the outside world that they had already submitted to the human race. One had to know that the angel race and fiend race were one of the top 10 races in the Saint's world. They had both submitted to Yu, and they were the first to submit. With him taking the lead, how could the other smaller races care about face and restraint? In the end, even before the human army arrived, the sacred race had already submitted to them. It could be said that all sides submitted. However, what made Yu rather displeased was that there were still two races that didn't submit to him. One was the dragon race. The dragon race usually didn't mix with the other sacred races. Moreover, they didn't participate in the previous war either. Moreover, because Yu's clone had already gradually taken control of the dragon race's authority, Yu didn't mind. But the other race didn't surrender and even fled with their entire race made Yu furious. That race was the Phoenix race. Feng Sanxiong was killed by Yu several times, but he still didn't die. This made Yu rather speechless. This guy's life was seriously too many. However, the current Feng Sanxiong was already no longer in Yu's eyes. After all, with Yu's current strength, he could kill Feng Sanxiong millions of times in an instant. However, the sudden disappearance of the Phoenix race made Yu somewhat puzzled. Almost coinciding with the time when Bai Lian disappeared, the Phoenix race also disappeared. And not only Feng Sanxiong, but also not only the core figures of the Phoenix race, but also the entire Phoenix race. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. No one noticed any unusual movements of the Phoenix race before they disappeared. No one knew how they disappeared. Even Yu personally went to the Phoenix race to investigate. Those people of the Phoenix race really seemed to have disappeared all of a sudden. Some of their treasures and the like were left intact in place and hadn't even been touched. Even the bedding of some people who were sleeping was still the same as before. It was as if their disappearance was directly transferred away by a certain expert using a great magical ability. Could it be that the supreme martial artist of the Phoenix race took action? But is the supreme martial artist's strength so terrifying? He took away the entire sacred race in a single night? This thought appeared in Yu's mind at the first moment. And after this thought appeared, the more Yu thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. Because at this moment, he could also take away the saints in his domain with the help of the sacred world source energy. And those who were taken away didn't have time to react at all. However, this was based on the fact that Yu had the source energy. In the sacred world, apart from him and the ruler, who else had the source energy? Maybe it's a 9-star supremacy or a titled supremacy. With their strength, there shouldn't be a problem. Yu thought, and then left. Unify the sacred world. Yu had now unified the sacred world and had become the overlord of the sacred world. But Yu's goal wasn't just that. If it was before, his goal of unifying the sacred world was to eliminate the demon race and the sacred race so that the human race could occupy the entire sacred world. But now, it was impossible for him to do so. Not to mention the many saints from the sacred race and the demon race. If they were killed, how much blood would Murong Yu's hands be stained with? Moreover, these people would become his subjects sooner or later, so why would he slaughter them? Most importantly, Murong Yu still wanted to obtain their faith and their power of faith. However, if he didn't eliminate them, once Murong Yu left the sacred world in the future, who would be able to suppress the sacred race and the demon race? At that time, the human race might even be wiped out. As a result, Murong Yu made a huge decision. The sacred world was originally divided into 3 regions by the 3 races. But now, Murong Yu had shattered all these boundaries, allowing the human race, the sacred race, and the demon race to live on the same land. As a result, there would still be conflicts. But the 3 races couldn't continue to divide and conquer like before, because they didn't have the ability, and there were even more races outside of them. In the beginning, they might not be used to it, and there would be many conflicts. But as time passed, they would slowly get used to this kind of life. Then, everyone would integrate into each other's lives. In the end, although their race and bloodline were still there, it was like a new big family. Over time, they wouldn't come up with the idea of driving the other races out of the sacred world and monopolizing the sacred world. In addition, Murong Yu had also removed the Human Race Alliance, and at the same time opened up Shenzhen. Shenzhen had 108 subsects in the entire sacred world, and each subsect could accept disciples of any race. As long as they met the requirements, no matter what race they were, they could join the subsect. As for the main sect, Murong Yu didn't open up all of them. He didn't directly recruit disciples. Instead, he selected the most talented, most loyal, and strongest disciples from each subsect to become the main sect's disciples. Chapter 1782. A two-pronged approach. In just a few decades, the holy world had slowly recovered from the chaos of war, and a unified holy world was beginning to take shape. However, this was just the beginning. It was impossible to achieve a unified holy world like the God world and immortal world in a short period of time. However, as long as this continued, the holy world would definitely be unified. In the future, there would be no more wars and no more fights for territory. All the saints would live in peace and contentment, cultivating and adventuring. Of course, this did not mean that the holy world would be peaceful because of this. It was just relatively peaceful, and there would be no large-scale wars or racial wars. However, small-scale wars and personal battles could not be banned. Murong Yu did not need to ban them. If the holy world wanted to increase its strength, it needed to have battles. And battles were one of the ways to increase one's strength. In a few decades, many people understood how important the unification of the holy world was to them. In a time where there were no racial conflicts or territorial restrictions, they could go wherever they wanted, and they had a lot more freedom. Moreover, the peaceful environment allowed them to cultivate in peace. Shenzhen, as the #1 sect in the holy world, had 4 supreme beings holding down the fort. Other than Murong Yu, the other 3 supreme beings would teach Shenzhen's disciples every once in a while. Although they had just become supreme beings, they had only become supreme beings after fusing with Yao Tian and the others' bodies. Therefore, their knowledge in this area was extremely rich. Moreover, with their strength, it was more than enough to guide the experts on the holy rankings. In addition, Shenzhen treated everyone equally, and disciples of different races were treated the same. The branch sects were slightly better, and their treatment was not very good, but it was still much better than some of the other holy grounds. In the holy world, other than Shenzhen, there were many other sects and clans. Murong Yu did not restrict these. He had even separated the various holy lands and factions that had previously joined the Great Alliance of the human race. He allowed them to retain their own orthodoxies. However, Feng Yongji and the others, whose souls were controlled by Murong Yu, did not let them go. After all, these guys were still unwilling to submit to Murong Yu. When the saints' world had just been unified, Murong Yu would not let them go and let them cause trouble. At most, Murong Yu would only release them after the holy world was unified and stabilized. At that time, Feng Yong knew that they wouldn't be able to do anything even if they dared to stir up trouble. After all, Shenzhen had many experts on the Saint rankings. Currently, the number of experts on the Saint rankings in Shenzhen had already reached 100,000. In other words, Shenzhen had gathered more than half of the experts on the Saints rankings in the Saints world. After all, although there were many powerhouses on the Saint rankings, there were definitely not more than 100,000 of them. As for Shenzhen's 100,000 Saint-ranked experts, apart from a small portion of them being controlled by Shenzhen's experts, the rest were all part of Shenzhen's own. Of course, although their strength was high, only a small number of them could enter Shenzhen's main sect. The rest were mostly in the branch schools. However, they were not always in the branch schools. As long as their character passed the assessment of the main sect, they could enter Shenzhen's main sect. However, every time Sun Feiyong and the others gave a lecture, these Saint-ranked experts were qualified to listen. In addition to them, only the top and the highest level people of the sub-schools were qualified to listen to the discussions. But in the main sect, even the most ordinary Shenzhen's disciples were qualified to listen to these lectures. One could imagine how good the treatment of Shenzhen's main sect's disciples was. These differences in treatment not only did not make the branch schools dissatisfied with the main sect. On the contrary, it aroused the enthusiasm of many disciples in the branch schools to cultivate. Because as long as they could meet the standards of the main sect's disciples, they could enter the main sect. As for whether they were jealous of the main sect's disciples who had ascended from below, of course they were jealous. However, with Murong Yu's status, they were Murong Yu's men. What was there to be jealous of? If they had the ability, they could also become Murong Yu's people, and then they could enjoy the best treatment. Everything was on the right track. So far, there was no trace of Bailian, and the Feng clan also seemed to have disappeared without a trace. As for the Dragon clan, although Murong Yu knew where the Dragon clan was, he did not touch the Dragon clan, because his clone was about to control the Dragon clan. On the contrary, the extraterrestrial sovereign was relatively calm and no longer sent people. This made Murong Yu feel strange, but it was just strange. They better never come back to the Holy World, otherwise the Holy World would be in chaos again. And now what Murong Yu lacked the most was time. As long as he was given hundreds or thousands of years, the Holy World's unification would mature. At that time, even if a sovereign came, he would not be able to threaten the unification. In Shenzhen's main hall, which represented the highest power, Murong Yu sat on the main seat. A burly man stood in the middle of the hall. Haha! This man constantly sized up his body, and after a long time, he laughed loudly. I never thought that I, Tianming, would have the chance to be resurrected. Yes, this man was an expert of the Sky Fire clan, Tianming. Of course, in the past, he was an expert in Murong Yu's eyes. But now, Tianming was only a primal chaos ancestor saint, and was nothing in front of Murong Yu. But back then, Tianming's severed finger had helped Murong Yu a lot, and even helped him escape death many times. As Murong Yu grew stronger, Tianming's help was almost non-existent. But Murong Yu did not forget the kindness he had shown him in the beginning. Therefore, after he unified the Holy World, he found Tianming's body parts that were suppressed in different places and then resurrected him. Murong Yu, thank you so much. Tianming looked at Murong Yu with gratitude, expressing his gratitude. Back then, he only saw Murong Yu's potential and did not have much hope. But he did not expect that he would win this time. Murong Yu's strength had increased so quickly that he could resurrect him. Tianming, your Sky Fire clan still exists. You can return to the Sky Fire clan now, or you can join Shenzhen and become a disciple, or you can leave on your own. It's your choice. Tianming's face lit up with excitement. Hee, of course I'll join Shenzhen's main sect. I'm not stupid, so why would I leave when I have such a good opportunity? Then, the two chatted for a while, and Tianming left. It was not that Murong Yu wanted him to leave, but that he was in too much of a hurry. He wanted to become a disciple of Shenzhen's main sect as soon as possible. Besides Tianming, Murong Yu also helped those who had helped him in the past, and killed some of them. Most importantly, the beasts that had killed Zhao Yun back then. Whether it was the human clan, the holy clan, or the demon clan, those who had killed Zhao Yun back then were all killed by Murong Yu. However, there were not many of them, because there were many supremes who had taken action back then. Otherwise, with Zhao Yun's strength back then, how could he have been killed by these people? As for those supremes, Murong Yu had to be killed. But now is not the time. His stage was still in the holy world, and it did not extend to the outer realm. Most importantly, his strength was not at that level yet. Now, his cultivation was only a rank 5 chaotic ancestor sage, and his cultivation was still a long way from the supremes. It was just that his soul had reached the 8-star realm. Therefore, Murong Yu had been searching for objects that contained great power during this period of time. As long as he refined those things, Murong Yu's strength would increase. However, how could those things be so easily obtained? Therefore, while searching for these things, Murong Yu was also looking for ways to raise the level of his soul. During the time that he had unified the holy world, he had entered the Wenzhen secret realm several times. He had found a soul sovereign that Huarong had mentioned back then. However, there was nothing there, only a vengeful spirit that had reached the holy ranking. It was directly devoured by Murong Yu, but it only increased the level of Murong Yu's soul by a little. However, it was not any better. During other times, Murong Yu had also gone to those vengeful spirit valleys and used his great ability to devour those vengeful spirits. Although it was not enough to raise Murong Yu's soul from the 8-star realm to the 9-star realm, it was still much stronger than before. If he wanted to kill Yao Tian now, he could easily do so without the power of faith. However, there was still a long way to go before he could reach the 9-star realm. At this point, one had to mention Murong Yu's power of faith. Ever since he had unified the holy world, Murong Yu had begun to build statues of him all over the holy world. Originally, his holy aura had already reached an extremely high level, and he had gathered many worshippers. When Shenzhen began to operate, Murong Yu's worshippers began to increase exponentially. At the same time, his power of faith also increased exponentially. Moreover, it was not just the quantity that increased, but the quality as well. If it was the same amount of power of faith, the power of faith now was many times stronger than before. It was extremely terrifying. Holy Master, I've recently received news that an extremely heavy weapon fragment was found in the Soul Forbidden Water region. It should contain an extremely large amount of power. On this day, the Hall Master of the Saint Execution Hall, Xian Junhua, walked in to report. Now, Murong Yu had returned the position of Hall Master of the Saint Execution Hall to Xian Junhua, or rather, Xian Junhua had never stepped down from his position. Soul Forbidden Water region. Murong Yu's eyes narrowed slightly. The Soul Forbidden Water region was an extremely special place. In the original holy world, it was an extremely large body of water. This body of water was nothing special compared to other bodies of water. The only special thing was that one could not use their spiritual energy there. In other words, if Murong Yu went there, he would not be able to reach the honorable stage. At most, he would only have the strength of an expert on the holy rankings. I'm in need of an item that contains a large amount of power, and now it has appeared, and it's in the Soul Forbidden Water region. Thousands of thoughts flashed through Murong Yu's mind. He could vaguely smell the scent of a conspiracy. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.